you who are in the audience, I will be introducing.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie LaRocque from the South Florida Water Management District, and you're either here in the auditorium this morning with us or you've joined on Zoom. So welcome to the quarterly meeting of the Everglades Technical Oversight Committee. We're going to go ahead and do some short introductions, and then we're going to follow it with some additional introductions. So first of all, I'm the representative for the South Florida Water Management District, and I would like the other reps to please introduce themselves, starting with the other three of you who are here in the room.
Good morning, Ed Smith with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection.
Lori Miller, Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge.
Donato Surratt, Everglades National Park.
Go ahead, Dan and Mr. Barquette.
Good morning, Dan Crawford, TAC Rep, Corps of Engineers. Apologize for not being there in person.
And John Barquette, Special Master appointed by the court.
Great, thank you all so much. I wanted to cover a quick bit of business. I am personally expecting some very healthy discussion this morning. And so I just wanted to kind of reiterate or remind you guys or get concurrence, if so be it, from the reps about how we want to operate and call on people. So we're asking that if you are on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are a panelist on Zoom, you do have the ability to unmute yourself and start talking. So we're going to ask that you either wait for me to call on you or your TOC representative. So at any time, one of the reps could ask you to speak up. That would be fine. And I do want to note for you guys, you know, they don't tell you in the instructions, but if you raise your hand and I'm the one calling on you, I'm going to do it in the order you raised your hand. And Zoom keeps track of that for me, so I don't have to keep track of it. But I wanted to just make sure everybody was okay with kind of that scheme. It's a little different with this hybrid format. You know, we can easily point at somebody in the audience and ask them to come up to a microphone, but a little tougher when we're doing this hybrid format. So I would just ask the reps, is it okay with you guys if we do that?
This is Lori. I totally agree. Thank you.
This is Ed with DEP. Same here. Sounds great.
I support the approach. Donato.
Okay. Thank you, Donato. And Dan, I don't know if you have any
Concur
technical reps,
as
but
well,
thank you so much. So why don't we now introduce, I'm going to say technical staff, and I'll just go ahead and start with some folks I have in the audience here. They're either presenting or they're the usual suspects of folks who might speak up during a meeting. So here in the audience, and maybe you can see the backs of some of these folks, we've got Chelsea Q, Jody Hutchins, Stuart Van Horn, We have a couple other district folks here, but I'm not necessarily expecting them to speak. I could be surprised. And then on the call, if I could just start with others from the district who are here as technical staff, if you could just introduce yourself, please.
Nana Durikinen.
Thank you, Nenad. Next, we're going to go to DEP. We have a few technical folks on the call. If you could please introduce yourselves.
Good morning, this is Jordan Tidio.
Good morning, Mylene Sotolongo Lopez.
And this is Luke Hudson.
Great, thank you all so much. I'm looking here on the shopping list of people. Other technical staff or consultants. I still don't see anybody from the Army Corps. So, Donato, I think you have at least one person on the call here. If you could introduce yourself, sir, please. And for Bill Walker, this is a mic check for you too, please. If you could just unmute and say hello.
Just did. Hello, this is Bill Walker, consultant for Interior.
Great, thank you so much. All right, how about others from the federal side? Dan?
Yes, Dan Scheit, EPA, good morning. And I'd also like to mention, also attending for EPA, we have Becky Allenbach and Chris Decker. Thank you.
Oh, great, thank you. And I think they're all logged in as attendees. I can see, even if we're not taking comments from the public at that point, I can still see if they raise their hands, so you guys can let us know if they need to speak up. Glad to have you all here. Hey, Dilip, I believe you're another technical person. We'd like to have you unmute and say hello, please. Okay, he's working on it. All right. How about we go back around now to, we have some legal representatives here. So let's talk about any other legal folks from any agency, if you would, please.
Yes, hi. Good morning. Charles DeMonico, outside counsel to Florida DEP, and Kenny Hayman's in a judicial proceeding this morning, so he won't be in attendance.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Hi, this is Julia Lamonaco from the South Florida Water Management District.
Thank you, Julia.
Good morning. It's Judith Coleman from the United States Department of Justice, and I'm joined by Maggie Woodward on Zoom too.
Brooks, looks like you're unmuted.
This is Brooks Moore with the Army Corps of Engineers.
And this is Matthew Axtell from the Corps.
Thank you, Matt. And Phil, I think. Okay, we have Phil Steffen here. He did a mic check before we started, so he's also on here as a panelist. So thank you all for your patience as we work through the meeting today. It will be probably a very informative meeting, I'll put it that way. We have a number of items to go through. So first of all, if you're using your telephone and you want to raise your hand, please press *9. If you would like to unmute your microphone, press *6. I don't hear any interference yet, but keep in mind you only want to listen from one device if you're tuned in on Zoom. And we may remind you guys after some of the presentations about the proceedings as far as calling on people and all the rest of it, because I think we'll have some healthy conversation here. We do take comments. For those of you that are logged in as an attendee, we will take public comments at the end of the meeting. And even you, I keep track of when your hands are raised, okay? If you want to provide written comments, I hope you're here in person in the auditorium to do that. Chat. We already had somebody use the chat. If you are using the chat feature, that is going to be only if you're having a technical difficulty, which someone did. Otherwise, we need you to raise your hand and speak, or, that sort of thing. I am going to ask the reps, do we have any modifications for the agenda today?
This is Lori, negative.
This is Ed. No changes from DEP.
I have no changes, Donato.
No changes from the core either, Julie.
Great, thank you so much. The other thing I wanted to let you guys know, I'm logged onto the TOC webpage, which is why I'm flipping around on the screens, but I wanted to let you guys know everything that's posted on the website this morning. We have several data tables that we have been producing for many, many years. For the refuge, Shark River Slough, Taylor Slough, and coastal basins, you're going to see the word revised next to the refuge. What that means is if you looked at this table 2 or 3 weeks ago, a change was made and a revision has been posted. So for your information. For the second quarter, which covers April through June, which is what we're briefing today, you have the settlement agreement report, also with the word revised. So if you looked at it a couple of weeks ago, it has had a slight change. The quality assessment report, as well as the data file associated with the quality assessment report. So all those are posted. Also, we have read-aheads, and I'm going to read these off in the order I'm looking at them, so they may not be the order we use them, but we'll get to it. So we have the second quarter calendar year presentation that Chelsea will be presenting. That has been revised. We have a working group update. There are 2 working group updates. One is the presentation that Jody is going to be giving. The other one is titled Synthesis Report, and if you have not looked at it, I will warn you now, it's over 300 pages. But it's really great stuff. Next agenda item that's also posted here is the Appendix A water quality presentation that DEP is going to give. You're going to see the presentation was revised. We also have posted a series of comments and responses to the DEP presentation, just to be sure we cover everything. We have memo to the TOC from the principals. That's been posted out there for maybe about a week roughly, or a little bit longer. We'll be covering that at various points during the meeting. And then we have the draft notes from our last meeting, which was in September. And I will confess, the version of the notes that is currently posted is the 3rd version, but I really appreciate the reps getting back to us and letting us know about some corrections. So those are all posted on the website for everybody. And I just want to remind you, if you downloaded something a week or 2 ago, there may be a couple of minor changes from what we now have posted. Okay, speaking of, okay, we're going to do a couple more intros and mic checks because we were having some difficulties. So Dilip, did you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Dilip Shinde, I'm from Everglades National Park.
Great to have you here. And Eric, you're also on now.
Good morning, Eric Stella, National Park Service. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Julie, this is Dan. Just letting you know Jim Riley also joined from the Corps.
Oh, you guys are ahead of me. Do you want to unmute and say hello, Jim? He does not. If he unmutes and start talking, we'll know it's him. We'll ask him to introduce himself, but I do see him on the call here, so thank you, Dan. All right, our first order of business is the meeting notes. I know you all have seen 2 or 3 versions of the meeting notes, but I would entertain any kind of motion about making corrections, changes, or approval of the notes from our last meeting.
I motion to approve the existing notes as they stand. Over.
And this is Ed Smith, DEP. I second that motion. Thank you, Donato.
Okay, I'm good with the notes.
I'm good with the notes. This is Lori.
The Cora is good with the notes as well, Julie.
All right, thanks, you guys, and I really appreciate you reviewing them ahead of time. That helps us here. Next up, we have Chelsea Q. Chelsea's going to give us the second quarterly report. Take it away, Chelsea.
Good morning, TC Refs, Mr. Bucket. Thank you for having me to present the settlement agreement report for the second quarter of 2023. And we have monthly updates for individual month of April, May, and June for the refuge. And then we have the 12-month tracking results ending in April, May, and June for Shark River Slough, Taylor Swan coastal basins. So this table summarizes the compliance results for 3 areas. So the refuge at the top, the Shark River Slough in the middle, and the Taylor Swan coastal basins at the bottom. So each of these areas has their unique limit, a stage-based limit for the refuge, a flow-based limit for Shark River Slough, and a cons limit for Taylor Swan coastal basins. So on the top section for the refuge, here the limits called the long-term level, showing this 3rd column. It's inversely related to marsh stage to the right next to it, the column. So in this quarter, the marsh stage was relatively low, below 16.4 feet, and the long-term level was relatively high, above 10.5 parts per billion. And for April, May, and June, the monthly geometric mean TP concentration of samples collected in the marsh were consistent below their respective long-term levels calculated based on the marsh state. So in the middle section, for Shark River Slough, here it has a flow-based limit, and the limit's called long-term limit, shown in this 4th column, and it's inversely related with the 12-month flow. So for the 12-month ending April, May, and June, you can see that the total flow shown in the 2nd column was consistent above 1 million acre-feet, which exceeded the flow range of Appendix A equation. So extremely high flow, then it resulted in the lowest possible long-term limit at 7.6 parts per billion. So as such, low long-term limit, and the 12-month flow in mean concentration exceeded the limit. So in the bottom section for Taylor Solar and Coastal Basin, it has constant limit fixed at 11 parts per billion, and 12-month flow in mean TP concentrations ending in each month was very low, 5.1 to 4.8 parts per billion, and far below the limit at 11 parts per billion. And this slide focuses on the refuge. Here, the refuge has a stage-based limit shown in this red line, and it's inversely related to marsh stage, shown in these stepwise line with a shaded purple background. So for example, in January, when the stage was above 17 feet, really high, then the long-term level was 7.2 parts per billion at the lowest possible. Then from January to the second quarter, stage has decreased about 1 foot. Then the long-term level increased 3.5 parts per billion. Now it's above 10.5 parts per billion for this quarter. So these blue dots represent the monthly geometric mean TP concentrations of samples we collect in the marsh and need to stay below the long-term level. So this red dot represents an excursion happening in June 2022. And since then, in the next 12 months, there's no second excursion. So therefore, we don't have any exceedance. Then the 36-month average TP geometric mean was 6.8 parts per billion. It's about 2.3 parts per billion below the average of long-term level in this period. This slide shows basically the same information. And this slide provides the outlook for the next 4 months, shown in this bottom section. The next 4 months looks good. You can see the monthly geometric mean of each month work still consistent below the long-term levels. So move on to Shark River Slough. It has stage flow-based limit, and shown here as long-term limit in the 4th column, and it's inverse related to the 12-month total flow. So this top section shows the second quarter compliance results, and we included another 3 months of data outlook with provisional data. Actually, you can see the water year 2023 compliance results here, shown in the last row. So with the provisional data. Here, because the limit is inverse to flow, you can see that for each 12 month ending, for the 12 months ending in each month, the flow was consistent above 1 million acre feet, and that exceeded the Appendix A flow range and resulted in the long-term limit consistent at the lowest possible, 7.6 parts per billion. And at such low limit, the flow with mean TP concentration exceed the limit. For water year 2023, the total flow was 1.25 million acre feet, and the flow with mean TP concentration was 9.2, exceeded long-term limit. So actually, since the implementation of Tamiami Trail flow formula in March 2021, in the past 2.5 years, every month for the 12-month moving total flow was always near or above 1 million acre feet, which resulted in the long-term limit was consistently near 7.6 parts per billion or at 7.6. 80% time was at 7.6 parts per billion. So it shows that COP implementation increased the flow delivered to Shark River Slough and resulted in super low long-term limit based on the Appendix A flow-based equation. Looking at the historic compliance status, so these last three blue hatched bars represent the recent years using method 1.5. So we met the compliance in 2020, and we had exceedance in 2021 and 2022, and looking forward on an exceedance in 2023. So this slide displays the daily flow at Shark River Slough inflow structures. And you can see here the red line represented the flow at S334. So above this red line is the net flow that delivered into Shark River Slough. So during the previous TOC discussions, we conclude that the net flow under 9.2 feet is the cost that elevates the annual flow with mean TP concentration that's used for compliance. And as you can see that in water year 2023, here in the second quarter, the dry season, low stage conditions, this net flow is much higher than the previous 2 years. And you can also see the impact of Hurricane Ian, which arrived right before the beginning of the water year, and the flow increased right after the Hurricane Ian, and showing this higher flow here. So this slide displays flow that at structures discharging into the western Shark River Slough at S12A, B, C, D from top to the bottom. So S12A and B are only allowed to open 2.5 months under the COP operation. So from July 15 to September 30, unless there's a deviation from the COP operation, which actually is happening now. So currently, S12A and B is still open, long past their supposed closing date, September 30th. So as you can see, S12A, B discharge were minimal because they're only allowed open for 2.5 months. And even when they were open, the flow was much lower than S12C and D. So for this quarter, second quarter, S12AB has closed for quite a long time. You can see that. So only S12C and D were flowing. This slide shows the flows discharging into the northeast Shark River Slough via the eastern L29 canal between S33 and S334. In this segment canal, you can see 95% of flow comes from S33 and S33N, and another 5% come from S356. And this slide shows the flows discharging into northeast Shark River Slough between S33 and S334. And same thing, this is the same net flow concept above this red line. And again, for this water year, the second quarter, which is a dry season low stage, you can see substantial flow delivered to Shark River Slough compared to these previous 2 years. Previous 2 years already substantial, but this year was much higher. So this slide shows the biweekly flow in blue bars and the TP concentrations in cyan dot. So this pair of biweekly flow and the TP concentration are the basis to calculate the 12 flow weighted mean concentration. So again, here, the flow you see here is a net flow, and it's much higher than the previous 2 years. And using that 26 pairs of flow and TP concentration and composite together, and you get the 12-month flow with mean TP concentration ending each month, shown in these blue diamond. And the last diamond is the 12-month flow with mean concentration ending in June. So this slide shows the WCA3A Shark River Slough system conditions. So it shows the stage, WCA3A stage shows in this solid blue line at the top. And then the Shark River Slough inflow TP concentration in those yellow dots. And then the Shark River Slough inflow in those blue shaded areas. The second quarter end along this black line, so we add a few months look ahead, you can see the entire water year 2023 data. So again here, the water year 2023 began right after the passing of Hurricane Ian, and the WCA3 stage was above, see this dash green line went into zone A. Then after 2.5 months, then the stage decrease went into zone B for 6 months till mid of June, then went into zone A again. So in zone B, we know that the Tamiami Trail flow formula controls the release. You can see the flow, large flow sending into Shark River Slough. And also, again, we see here when the stage below 9.2 feet for the S33 headwater shown in this red line, substantial flows into Shark River Slough, along with this high TP concentrations. So the flow, the stage and TP concentration are very obvious. So overall, water year 2023, we see the substantial flow in the dry season below 9.2 feet. And this contributes to the elevated annual flow in TP concentrations. So move on to Taylor Slough and coastal basins. The 12-month flow ending through June was 357,000 acre feet, and the flow with mean TP concentration was 4.8 parts per billion, far below the long-term limit fixed at 11 parts per billion. Looking at a historical compliance status, again, these bars represent the annual flow with mean TP concentration, and they are far below the long-term limit. So this slide displays the flow distribution among the structures flowing into Taylor Slough and coastal basins. So as 18C shown at the top, shown the yellow shaded area, and S332D shown in this purple area. Those are two major inflow structures deliver majority of the flow to Taylor Slough and coastal basins. And this slide just split the flow at each individual structures. Again, we see S18C and S332D were flowing in the second quarter. And we can also see the flow increased, slight increase, and consistent flowing after the passing of Hurricane Ian. Then for this quarter, the G737 and S328 were closed. This slide displays the daily flows in and out of S332D flowway. Here, the upstream source was from S332D pumping, shown in this purple shaded area. Then portion of the water was shown in this, below this red line. That's carried by S332DX1 to the C111 South detention area, which is excluded from compliance calculation. And another portion of flow moved to Taylor Slough by S328 structure, shown in this neon green line. So again, S328 has been closed for a long time. And this slide shows the events flow in blue bars and the TP concentrations in sign dots. Again, this is actually weekly. So weekly flow and TP concentrations. And you can see that in the last 12 months, the TP concentrations has been consistent below, I think, 8 parts per billion. Again, you composite the 12-month of the flow and events flow and TP concentration data. That's where you get this moving 12-month flow with mean TP concentration shown in those diamonds. And the last diamond is the 12-month flow with mean TP concentration through June. So that's what we're reporting for the second quarter, 2023. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Anybody here, any of the reps or Mr. Barquette have questions or comments for Chelsea?
And I do not.
Thank you. Dan, you have your hand up.
I do, Julie. As always, Chelsea, thank you for the thorough presentation. You always do a tremendous job presenting the information. I just wanted to provide one quick point of clarification. You had mentioned that the S12 Alpha and Bravo are only open 2.5 months per year. I just wanted to clarify that the COP water control plan does allow, under high water conditions, for S12A and B to be open during October, and for S12 Bravo to be open during November. So this particular year, with those conditions, the high water in 3A at the end of the wet season, S12A and B, would have been both were allowed to stay open through the entirety of the month of October. Both of those structures did close on November 1st, and as you alluded to, the Corps did invoke a temporary plan deviation on November 17th to reopen those structures and bring the water levels down. So just want to clarify that we do have the ability under high water conditions to keep those structures open a little bit longer. Over. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Dan. Any other comments here? Did you want Dr. Walker? Bill Walker?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Bill Walker, consultant to Interior. Yeah, you were just talking about deviation from the COP. And I just wanted to make sure I understood. You're only talking about the flow volume and nothing to do with the water quality, even though COP has an algorithm for looking at the water quality impacts.
Somebody else needs to answer that question, not me. So Bill's asking or confirming about deviations. Dan, did you want to respond?
I'm happy to respond. Correct, Bill. The focal point of the temporary plan deviation was to address high water conditions that were unilaterally recognized by all of the stakeholders in the South Florida ecosystem restoration community. That temporary plan deviation started on November 17th did involve reopening S12 Alpha, S12 Bravo, S343 Alpha, and S343 Bravo. The NEPA document was circulated for public review, and that environmental assessment does include an assessment of water quality in addition to all of the other environmental factors. Over.
Right, yeah, thank you. I mean, so what you're saying is that flood control trumps everything else, right? In other words,
those are your words, not mine. The Corps evaluated the complete set of environmental conditions in deciding whether to proceed with this environmental assessment and NEPA action. And based on the total consideration of stakeholder input and the public health and safety risks of high water, we did elect to proceed with this deviation at this time. And the deviation will end as soon as the water levels drop below the top of the regulation schedule, which we're anticipating here within the next couple of weeks.
Right, I didn't mean to say that I disagree that flood control is a constraint. You know, I'm not disagreeing with that decision, in other words, but I just wanted to clarify, getting back situations where we don't have extreme flood risks, where the stages are lower, which is when we have the water quality. The question is whether the water quality model was being used to guide the operation as compared with just the flow delivery rule.
Thank you
I'll say,
both.
Bill, we obviously, when we're considering invoking adaptive management options under COP, we consider any and all information regarding water quality brought to through the COP water quality subteam, which would include, certainly you'd be welcome to participate in those discussions. In this particular deviation, I agree with you, the principal drivers were the elevated high water conditions, but I just want to make sure we're on record as saying that the...
Okay, send me an invite to those meetings, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. Any other comments or questions for Chelsea?
Julie, if I may, Ed Smith, DEP. Chelsea, just for reminding everyone here, on slide 2 in the presentation, it showed that the number of samples for April 23 were lower. Just to clarify for everyone in the room why there was a lower number of samples, and it always jumps out as me and I have to refresh my memory, so if you could, please.
Let me get to slide 2.
He's talking about only having 10 samples in the refuge, I think.
Yeah, because the stage was very low, 16.809 feet. So many sites were dried up or below the 10 centimeter, the sampling criteria. And you can see also the long-term level that's associated with stage is at near 12 parts per billion, 11.9 parts per billion. So.
Thank you, Chelsea, and as always, great presentation. Appreciate it.
Lori and Bill, I don't know if your hand is still up or up again. Go ahead, Lori.
Okay, Lori with the refuge. Chelsea, staying on slide 2, you mentioned that the total flow exceeded the equation. Can you repeat that comment and maybe explain a little bit for the group?
Yes, see the long-term limit, the limit used for compliance for the Shaka River slough inflow is a flow-based limit. So you calculate that limit based on flow, but this flow is 12-month total flow. So when we have these moving 12 months, these are not really the limit. The limit means federal water year from October to September. So before you hit to September, we're actually tracking that. Those are moving limit ending each month. So it's calculated based on the 12-month prior, 12-month total flow ending in that month. For example, here, June 2023, that's the flow from July to June, July 2022 to June 2023. And these total flow, you can see that every month, the 12-month flow exceeded 1 million acre feet. 1.03, that's the top range of appendix equation. When you calculate out of this range, appendix equation just set a fixed 7.6. So that's what I mean is you look at these total flow since timing trail flow from the implement. Every month, so in this like 30 months, the past 30 months, every month if you look at the total flow, that's near 1 million acre, 930, that's probably lowest. Then all above 1 million acre, that's why we always get the 7.6 parts per billion limit, 80 percentile, regardless of rainfall. We did have dry year in 2022, very low rainfall, but the flow is still near 1 million acre feet or above. And that's why we no longer see lower limit anymore, no, higher limit anymore.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. That helped a lot.
Okay, anybody else? And Bill, I don't know if you had another question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. It kind of follows up on what Dan was talking about. And, you know, what we really have is three objectives. The flood or constraint, I guess, you got the hydrology constraint, and then you have a goal to restore the hydrology in general, and then you have a goal to meet water quality and consent decree. And I don't know, I just the idea of applying some kind of decision theory, because, you know, where you take stakeholder input and they, you know, they state their preference, and then you kind of add it up into a, well, amounts to ending up an optimal strategy. I think they call it peri-optimal, Paris-optimal, something like that. Pareto optimal. I don't know, it's just an idea. It goes way beyond the consent decree, but if you want to look at the broader concerns in terms of restoration, something like that might be interesting to look at. But that's not really the consent decree. That's sort of a, you know, looking ahead kind of thing. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Sorry, I'm fiddling with my hearing aids here. See if I could turn the volume up on Dr. Walker. Okay, we got that. Anything else for Chelsea? Great, thanks a lot, Chelsea.
Bill, if you have no more comments, will you put your hand down, please?
And thank you for not making me go look how to put your hand down. Okay, before we launch into our next two agenda items, I'd like to do a little bit of a segue. If you have visited the webpage or listened to my recitation of all the various things we have posted out there, one of them is a memo from the principals. I'm going to have to look at the reps here. I do want to read parts of that memo right now. I don't know if you need me to read all of it, so if you need me to read it all in detail, please speak up now. Otherwise, I'm going to hit on a few points, and some of those points are going to be covered by Jody's presentation, which is next. So to let everybody know, we have a memo from the principals. It's dated November 2023. And this is related to the S333 working group, and I know everyone has been looking forward to a lot of information from the working group, and we have gotten, I'm amazed at the amount of work that was done, to be honest, everybody, but on top of that, the results were briefed to the principals, and they did send us a memo, so I'm going to just read a couple pieces of it and kind of gloss over the items that I know Jody's going to cover. So first of all, a reminder paragraph here. Entity principals provided a memo to the TOC representatives back in October of 2020, and they expressed concurrence with us that the water year 2019 Shark River slough exceedance was caused by a localized phenomenon of phosphorus release and transport related to patterns of stage and flow and less related to phosphorus coming from the EAA. So the working group was created and was tasked to research the localized phenomenon and develop a consensus recommendation for solutions to minimize TP, total phosphorus transport. So the working group did put an outline of projects together. They met, they did a whole boatload of work. Again, Jody's going to cover a lot of that with everyone. I also mentioned the synthesis report at the opening of a meeting. It's 313 pages, and no, we're not going to read that to you here. But I do encourage folks to go take a look at that as well. So there were some recommendations. There were engineering and maintenance recommendations, some monitoring because we want to see what happens, and the possibility of a couple of other studies or more studies. Again, reading directly now from the memo, these recommendations by the working group serve as the present method for addressing current and potential future Shark River slough exceedances that occur as a result of the localized drivers in the headwaters of the S333 structures. The principals do concur with the working group recommendations, and they've begun to develop actions to implement some of those recommendations. And if Jody doesn't quite cover it, I will let you know the engineering folks at our agency have indeed started to work on those recommendations and get more information so that we can get some work going. I think everything else in the memo is going to be covered by Jody, so why don't I turn this over to Jody? Give us a second, folks. We're trying to get the slides centered for you. Hold on.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay. All right. Good morning. My name is Jody Hutchins, and I am with the district, the South Florida Water Management District. I am here today to present the multi-agency agreed-upon recommendations to address the Shark River slough exceedances. So just a little bit of background. The S333 working group was formed in calendar year 2020 following the October 2020 memo. And Julie read you the quote from that memo indicating that that the working group should be formed to address the 2019 Shark River slough exceedance. And there was concurrence that that exceedance was caused by a localized phenomenon of phosphorus release and transport related to patterns in stage and flow, and less related to phosphorus coming from the EAA. The working group was directed to research this localized phenomenon, to identify the cause, and to propose solutions to it. The working group developed an outline of 11 initial solutions, referred to as the engineering, maintenance, and operational solutions, also known as EMOs, to be evaluated and studied in 2 sequential phases. Phase 1 focused on the sediment characterization upstream of the S333 structure and the nearby reaches of the L29 and the L67A canals. That particular portion of the Phase 1 study was led by the National Park Service. And then Phase 1 also included modeling of flow scenarios and the potential effect of sediment entrainment. And that particular study was led by the South Florida Water Management District. So this slide here is just to explain the differences on what was initially envisioned by the working group between these Phase 1 and Phase 2 studies. Phase 1 was very limited in scope, and it only emphasized on the canal maintenance through initial localized EMOs. That's our engineering, maintenance, and operational solutions. For example, sediment removal and sediment traps. And in order to study the nutrient sources and mechanics of transport, a future Phase 2 would be needed. For example, what are the dominant sources of phosphorus? Is it in the sediment, the bed, the flock, or is it suspended within the water column? And what is contributing to these components? So that is still an unknown, and that is something that could potentially be studied further in a future Phase 2, which I will talk about a little bit more later in the presentation. This slide presents the predominant study area for the Phase 1 studies. The figure on the left provides the location of the sampling events from the sediment characterization study, which extends approximately 1,500 feet upstream of the S333 complex and both the L67A and L29 canals. The figure on the right shows the hydrodynamic study model domain by the yellow rectangles on the figure to include these portions of the canals, the S333 complex, and a small portion of the marsh. This slide is just to provide a high-level summary of what the working group learned from the Phase 1 studies that directly informed the recommendations. So what we learned was that there's more than 8,000 cubic meters or 10,500 cubic yards of sediment in the study area, and that sediment total phosphorus levels were highest in the L29 canal, followed by just upstream of the S333 complex, and then the L67A canal, and these levels are indicative of entrenchment if transported. I'd also want to mention that the L29 canal flows were predominantly flowing in the westward direction, so that's towards the S12 structures during portions of the 2-year study that the tilt meter was deployed. We also learned that the sediment samples collected in the L67A and L29 canals, coupled with the hydrodynamic modeling, revealed that flow velocities are high enough to entrain these sediments, and that the conceptual modeling revealed that installing low sill weirs upstream of the S333 complex will reduce velocities, therefore reducing bed load transport. I do want to mention that there was a lot of information gained from the studies. That's why the report that Julie mentioned was 300 pages long. It is posted on the website. There is a summary document. That report, the actual synthesis report is roughly 50 pages long. And then what is attached to that synthesis report are the actual reports from the universities that was led by the National Park Service, and a report from the district on the hydrodynamic model. There's also an appendix that includes a comments matrix that documents the review of those reports during the working group collaboration. So this one slide is just a very high-level summary of what was learned and what directly informed the recommendations. But I do encourage everyone to go and take a look at those reports because there's a lot of information gained and a lot more that was learned during these phase 1 studies. Okay, so, and now to talk about the recommendations, and I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge all of the agencies that's shown on this slide. It was a very huge collaboration between each of the agencies, and just to give you a sense of the level of effort that went into this and got us to where we are today. The working group, we have been meeting monthly since November of 2022. That meeting frequency increased to biweekly at one point and even weekly at one point when the study results, the final reports were released to the working group in June and July of 2023. Staff representing each agency worked diligently to review and interpret the data that was collected and the results that were presented that ultimately got us to these recommendations. And as Julie mentioned, the memo that was posted to the TOC website from November of 2023 documents concurrence from the consent decree principles on these recommendations. So this slide lists each of the recommendations that I will discuss in more detail on the next coming slides. But just to kind of lay out the framework, so they're broken out into initial actions and future actions. So the way that this is structured is that the working group got authorization to move forward with implementing the initial engineering and maintenance solution, and also following up with a monitoring and assessment program. And then depending on what we learn from the monitoring and assessment program, the working group will determine whether or not we want to move forward with an innovative technologies feasibility study and or advancing to what was initially envisioned as our phase 2 study. So I'll talk a little bit more about each of those coming next. So for the initial engineering and maintenance solution, the working group proposed and was approved to proceed with the removal of canal sediments that extends 150 feet upstream of the S33 complex and both the L67A canal and the L29 canal, and also upstream of the S33 complex intake bay. And then follow up with installing a series of low sill weirs. So the conceptual locations are shown by the figure by the red bars in the canal. I will mention that the exact height and locations of these low sill weirs need to be studied and fine-tuned. There's modeling occurring as we speak to kind of determine, what is the most effective location to install these low sill weirs. The ultimate goal is to reduce near bed velocities and sediment transport and to facilitate settling and restrict the movement of sediments containing total phosphorus. So, the low sill weirs that are proposed at the terminus of the dredged area, we're pretty much in agreement on, but as far as the exact locations of these intermediate weirs, we just want to make sure that, they're being placed in the appropriate locations to achieve the goal that we're seeking. So once those engineering and maintenance solutions are completed, I'm sorry, I think I failed to mention the timeline. So the estimated completion for this work is in federal water year 2025. And that's for both the removal of the canal sediments and the low sill weirs. We do anticipate that the removal of the canal sediments will occur first, just because the permitting process is less stringent. We're seeking an exemption for permitting based on the fact that this is considered maintenance dredging. There is work already underway to submit the permit applications for this work. The pre-construction survey is occurring this week, and we expect that report to come out in January. As I mentioned, the low sill weirs, we're still conducting modeling, and once that modeling is complete, then we'll be ready to get moving and submitting the permits required for those. So we do expect completion of this engineering maintenance solution in federal water year 2025, and that is based on expedited permitting and conducive construction conditions. So for the monitoring and assessment program, so this is going to occur directly following the implementation of the engineering and maintenance solution. So either the removal of the canal sediments or the low sill weirs, whichever comes first, which we expect the removal of the canal sediments to come first, as I mentioned previously. We want to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the initial solution. We'll also use the data that's collected from this program to identify optimization opportunities. For example, are we seeing the results that we intend? Did we get the placement of those low sill weirs correct? And then also to inform future actions. So the monitoring and assessment program is very comprehensive. We have structured it to include multiple, components. As shown by this slide, we're going to be taking bathymetric surveys, sediment sampling, surface water sampling. We're going to be conducting canal flow monitoring and directionality. We're really trying to understand, what are the sediment accretion rates, and are these engineering and maintenance solutions doing what was intended? And then we're also going to be taking this data and evaluating it annually. And if you had a chance to look at the memo from the principals to the TOC reps, it does indicate that an annual report will need to be produced. And that is to report to the principals, what did we learn from the monitoring and assessment program from the year. This is going to occur annually. And basically we need to indicate, are the engineering and maintenance solutions effective? Are there any recommendations for optimization to make them more effective? Or does the working group feel like we need to keep monitoring, or do we know enough that we can discontinue monitoring? Because this monitoring was requested to occur up to 5 years. That's not to say that we need to continue for 5 years. We're going to let the data kind of tell us whether or not we need to keep monitoring. So that will be part of our annual report. And then we'll also, indicate whether we want to continue or discontinue the monitoring. So an innovative technologies feasibility study, this was also part of the recommendations package that the working group presented to the principals, because it is acknowledged that the initial engineering and maintenance solution of the removal of the canal sediments and the low sill weirs predominantly targets consolidated sediment at the bottom of the canal. So we know that there's also total phosphorus that lives within the floc layer of the sediment, and then also can be suspended within the water column. So but the working group really wasn't at a point to recommend any particular solution to target the phosphorus that lives in the flock or within the water column. So we felt that an innovative technologies feasibility study would be advisable to investigate, like, what are the innovative technologies that are out there that can help us deal with this. We know that there are, sorry, the word is escaping me. There's a chemical that you can put into the water to kind of help bind that phosphorus and let it settle out. Coagulant. Coagulant. So there was several coagulants that was recommended, but we really weren't far enough along with understanding if any particular coagulant would be appropriate for this location. We want to make sure they're environmentally sensitive. So there's still a lot of research and study that would need to go into it before we can come forward with a particular recommendation for this. What I'm showing on the slide here is an example of an innovative technology that sparked some interest by the working group. This is an example of the use of biochar baffle curtains. This is a schematic that was put together by Jose Gordiardo. He works at the district. This is just a conceptual map of, what this could look like. This figure shows the placement of these curtains, and there's, to allow for boat traffic. He planned for, a 50-foot gap within these curtains to allow for navigation to occur. But the idea is that you install these baffle curtains, and then the phosphorus that is suspended within the water column can kind of absorb to these curtains. But there's still a lot of unknowns. We don't know what form of phosphorus that these baffle curtains prominently target. We know that within this area upstream of S333, phosphorus is primarily in the form of particulate phosphorus. So that's something that we still need to understand more. There is a pilot study going on within the C51 basin. So that's, kind of on the southeastern side of Lake Okeechobee. So we'll just monitor what's happening with that pilot study. We're going to move forward with the engineering and maintenance solutions as recommended. We're going to monitor and evaluate them. And then once sufficient information is collected, the district or the working group will then determine whether or not we want to pursue this innovative technologies feasibility study, and that will be included in the annual report that is submitted to the principals. And finally, the phase 2 studies, that was also part of the recommendation package that went to the principals. As I mentioned earlier, the working group acknowledged that advancing to phase 2 is needed to further evaluate the regional nutrient transport, to better understand the nutrient origins and dynamics in the general system. So again, it was suggested that we proceed with the initial engineering and maintenance solution as presented, and monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of those solutions. And then once we get some data and have an understanding of their effectiveness, then the working group will make a recommendation on whether we feel it is necessary to pursue phase 2. And that will also be reported to the principals in the annual reports. And that is all I have. So thank you very much.
Okay, Lori, I see your physical hand. You're the first person up. So we'll get comments from the reps and panelists as we go here. But Lori, it looks like you've got a comment or question.
Yeah, Jody, that was really helpful. Great highlights from a lot of work. So the low sill weirs, I didn't see a picture of that for the group. Can you give us a little bit of a visual? Does it go from canal bank to canal bank, all the way to the bottom, all the way to the surface of the water? Or can you paint a little bit of a picture?
Yes, sure. So the low sill weirs, at first we were thinking it would be something that, more in the form of a geotube. And a geotube, it's basically material that you fill these geotubes. And what was favored by that alternative was that it could potentially be removed and relocated if it was more of like a pilot study, because like I mentioned, we need this additional modeling to help us pinpoint like the exact height and the exact locations. But our engineering team is thinking that, once you install a geotube, it could potentially, come apart. Maybe what the working group envisioned as a conceptual of what we were thinking, well, this would be really great because we can just move it to a better location if we feel it's necessary. But speaking with our engineering and construction folks, they explained that's not really how they work. Once you put them in, you're kind of committed. They may fall apart. So now our engineering and construction group is thinking of going with a more traditional style weir. And the canal depth, I believe, is about 20 feet. And what was modeled under phase 1 was that they be about 7 feet high off the canal bottom. And that got some good localized benefits, where by having a 7-foot high weir sill was effective enough to decrease velocities just upstream of those weirs, low enough to allow for that settling before going over the weir, and then the velocity kind of starts to increase again before getting to the next weir. So that modeling is ongoing. And so that's kind of where we are with the low sill weirs.
Okay, so it doesn't go bank to bank, so there will still be some navigation, right?
It is going to go bank to bank for the whole, cross-section of the canal. And because of the depth of the canal, there's no concerns as far as it impacting navigation.
Okay, so it's far enough below the surface of the water?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Anything else? Donato, you have your physical hand up, and I notice you have a technical person also with his hand up.
Okay, thank you for asking that question, Lori. I thought I had it all figured out already. But so we're not going to have movable weirs. So we're saying they're going to be permanent now?
I don't think we're far enough along to say that definitively they're going to be permanent. I just know that our engineering and construction group are exploring other alternatives from the geotubes that the working group initially envisioned. They just feel like for the purpose that was, I think the reason why we were drawn to them is the fact that you can remove them. Well, the geotubes, they explained that that's not really, they can just come apart and you could create, a bigger mess than what you wanted. So, so they're really not far long enough to say that, okay, we're going to go with this particular type of weir, but they are exploring other options.
So are there other options that are not permanent?
There's aqua dams was something else that was thrown around. I know that's similar to a geotube. It's just a different type of material that gets put inside of the weir. But I think there's some, that particular type of weir was not really meant to be submerged. It's, a weir that water would flow over top versus something that is submerged in the canal. So I know they are exploring options. So I don't think that right now we could say that, they can't move forward with an option where it can be removable, because I don't know that at this point. but they are looking into, options that are out there. So if you have any ideas that you want to offer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Walker, I see you have your virtual hand up.
There it is. Okay, yeah, thank you. I guess I had two threads. The primary one is on the curtains. And we talked earlier about flood control. And I'm just wondering whether you can design these things to be robust to withstand an extreme flood, because if that happens, you might end up with a pile of junk at S333. You know what I mean? How do you structurally? How do you design these things to withstand that? And then the related question is, how do you clean them? Is there a back flush? Because eventually sediment's going to build up inside all the microbial growth and stuff that's trapped moving through it. So my experience with that kind of thing is, well, sometimes it works at low flow. It's good for like a wastewater treatment plant. But when you have a pulse system like this, you might have problems. So you look at the downside risk of something like that. That's it. The other one is related to the origin of the sediment particles, tracking it back to inorganic versus organic and marsh derived.
Okay, thank you for both of those bills. I'm just going to comment that I think some of what you brought up is why the engineers were suggesting something a little different than what the working group envisioned for the low sill weirs. I have a huge amount of faith in our engineers at the district, so I'm hoping and assuming they will be able to accommodate your comments about the flooding and those sorts of things. The other item, I would suggest we all still have those questions, and that may be something that follows later on with the studies. So thank you for that. Dan Crawford, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Julie. And Jody, thank you for the very thorough presentation of 2 years plus worth of work. I really appreciate you bringing it out to this team. I just want to reiterate, certainly the Corps will have to be involved in the technical reviews because the placement of these weirs are going to be placed in the federal canal system. So certainly our leadership at the Corps of Engineers is committed to working with our state and other federal partners to ensure the permits are done expeditiously. And to that end, I just want to kind of circle back on Donato's point. I think that as the engineering and construction team at the Water Management District looks at these low sill weir options, it's going to be real important that we continue to engage with the 333 working group to ensure that the technical input and any implementation concerns are worked through at the agency level before any official permit application is submitted to the Corps of Engineers. And I would say, just from my technical perspective, maybe the geotube is something that makes sense on the terminus side, at the far north end and at the far west end, where we are pretty certain that those locations don't need to move, and those low sill weir placements could be beneficial to work with the sediment removal, which you alluded to would likely be the first one out of the box, so to speak, in terms of the sequencing. And I think we acknowledged in the working group deliberations that it's important that if you do the sediment removal, that you make sure you don't have a upstream source that can then slough into that area downstream, upstream of the structures. And I think that agree completely that the geotube placement in the intermediary positions is something that probably needs more work. And I just want to emphasize from the Corps' perspective that it's important that continues to be talked through and brought through the entire representation of the agencies on the working group. Thank you.
That's great, Dan. I just want to ask Jody really quickly, are you the one that sets up the working group meetings?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I have to assume we'll work out some kind of status working group meetings as we go here. I don't want to ignore all the hard work everybody's done and the great input. So thanks a lot, and Dan, we'll make sure that happens. Mr. Barquette, you are next up with your hand up.
Thank you. And thanks for the presentation. It was very helpful to people who, like me, who are not as smart as all of you. What concerned me though was in your slide 3, you posed the question of what are the dominant sources, and you had a parenthesis, sediment flock and suspended in the water column, and what is contributing to those components from the canals and marsh within Water Conservation Area 3A. But then when you jump to your slide 11, and this is apparently a part of the phase 2 studies under slide 3, but if you jump to slide 11, you're suggesting that there may or may not be a phase 2 study, and it seems to me concerning anyway, that you might not figure out the source question, or at least not explore the source question in depth, whether you have a phase 2 study or not. So I was a little concerned that your phase 2 was in part focused on trying to figure out source, but then phase 2 may not occur. Am I misreading this, or was this an intentional connection?
Hi, Mr. Burkhead. Thank you for that. No, I think you're understanding it correctly. And then the reason why it's structured this way is because with phase 1, and I want to kind of bring everyone back to February of 2021, when the working group first came out with their initial set of recommendations and the way that was structured, because I think understanding that kind of connects the dots into why we are where we are right now. So in February of 2021, the working group had a couple of options, and that was, number one, let's move forward with dredging and upstream of S333, because at that time, it was understood that that's where, that was what was contributing to the Shark River slough exceedances. We had these spikes in total phosphorus at the S333 structure. So the working group, that was one of the options. Let's just go ahead and move forward with dredging without fully understanding or knowing anything else. The next option was, well, let's proceed with some studies. We can do phase 1, where we just focus on localized. It's going to be, we're going to get an initial level of understanding of what's happening before we just jump the gun and invest money and do all this work. Come to find out, well, we really don't have confidence that it's going to be effective. But we could move forward with phase 1. We could do a localized study to kind of give us some information and give us some confidence that these initial solutions will get us the results that we intend. Or we could study it all. We could do the phase 1, we can understand what's happening locally. We could do the phase 2 concurrently, where we're understanding what's happening regionally and what exactly is causing these Shark River slough exceedances. So at that time, when those options were presented, it was advised to move forward. We were not given the go-ahead to move forward with the dredging at that time. It was decided that we need an initial level of understanding. We need the confidence that by doing this dredging, that we're going to get the results that we intend. So let's move forward with phase 1. Let's see what we learn. And at that, it was kind of like a stop-go structure, where we're going to first proceed with phase 1. We're going to review the results from phase 1. We're going to reevaluate, reassess, make a decision at that time. Do we have enough information from phase 1 to say with confidence that we feel like this initial engineering and maintenance solution will be effective? And if the answer is yes, the working group will recommend that, which is what we did. If the answer is no, the working group will not make recommendations for engineering and maintenance solutions, or EMOs. we will say, we need more information. We're not comfortable. We got some information from phase one, but we need more before we can say with confidence that this will work. So we're not going to move forward with recommendations for actual solutions. We're going to say we need to go into phase two. But the working group did not go that route. We felt that we had a lot of good information in phase one to stay with confidence that we feel like this will get us what we need. And then we're going to implement this monitoring and assessment program so that way we can, evaluate it. And if it is learned during that, that monitoring and assessment program that that's not the case, then the working group will say, okay, we need to continue these studies. We need to figure out what is exactly causing these exceedances.
I'm not going to prejudge anything. It just seems to me that, I don't know what the budget is for all this work, but it seems to me if you're going to be spending all this money, you're going to be spending it again in a few years and again in a few years. I don't see the issue going away unless you have a better grasp of upstream sources. I'm happy to, I'm a patient person, but I'm old. And that's what makes me sometimes impatient because I'm old. And I'm hopeful that you will not abandon trying to figure out whether or not you're going to be doing this over and over and over again because you haven't really figured out if there's a way to deal with source issues.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you, Mr. Burkett. Hey, Dr. Walker, I see your hand is up.
Yes, on this business about the problem not going away, kind of goes back to a question about the fundamental research on the marsh and the marsh sediment responses to inflow trends. I mean, we've talked about it before that some of the high concentrations coming to the structures is not coming in from the upstream structures now, but it's just the marsh purging itself of phosphorus. It's stored in the sediment as well as vegetation. So is the district working on that research or the USGS? I know they've done a lot of work on it. I'm just wondering, can you provide a quick update on that? Because it really could, I mean, you could be pointing the finger to the upstream when it's really just the memory, which means you kind of have to be patient with it. That's my question.
Okay, thank you for the question. Number one, I think you're going to see some more information from the DEP presentation, and I can't really speak for everybody here, but there's an awful lot of work going on around the Everglades associated with very many projects, and I think we're doing the best we can to leverage that information to help us with our current situation. But I also think some of what you're bringing up, Bill, is also embodied in this possible phase 2 studies.
Right, but I mean, I didn't mean to imply that I don't, that I believe that it's the memory of the marsh. I mean, we talked about before the upstream thread from, especially in the Western Basin, coming down to the western end of Shark Slough. I don't know, maybe Paul is going to address that as well. But, okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you. Anything else for Jody from the reps? I'm assuming Dr. Walker just hasn't put his hand down, so that's okay. I can catch the mute and unmute part. Anybody else have comments or questions related to the working group?
Hey, Jody. Again, great presentation. It's really nice to see the wrap up or kind of, full circle closure of this. So it's great to see that we're moving forward on all of these things. Just wanted to offer to the working group, when you get to that point, the department has an innovative technologies program where we evaluate multiple innovative technologies for nutrient uptake. We would be happy to offer some of the information we've gained from those grant efforts, if you're interested in those. One of those just happens to be biochar. We're working with some groups on that right now, so perhaps we can provide some information that may be helpful going forward in the future. But we're also exploring a lot of other alternatives. Some are, more biological alternatives. Some are the coagulants or flocculants that you mentioned, but all of them are aimed at addressing nutrient concerns. So if that is of interest to the group, please let me know. We'd be happy to put together something for you.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so just one more. This is Lori with the Refuge. I want us to hear what Mr. Barquette said. And that meaning and being that we need to also continue to focus on the source, where what we're doing now, which I feel really, really good about, the short term, to me, the way I see it is that it's more of a maintenance solution. But I don't know that we've hit yet on the long-term solution. So I just wanted to reemphasize what Mr. Barquette said, is that I think we really need to continue to focus on the source.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, it's not late enough for me to ask you guys if you want a lunch break, so I'm assuming not. Wasn't sure how long this would take this morning. So thanks a lot, Jody. We really appreciate you spearheading and keeping things moving, and we have quite a bit of support that I'm aware of, both here at the district and DEP and some of the other agencies that are involved. So thanks an awful lot. Our next presenter is Ed Smith from DEP, and Donato is waving.
Yes. I am going out of turn, and I apologize for that. I do have a comment on this presentation prior to it getting started, and definitely appreciate the high quality of the presentation that's coming up that you guys have not had a moment to see, but we did have the opportunity to review it in advance, and definitely appreciate that, Ed. We did provide some comments, and one of them I have to address now before we initiate this so we can have at least a minor discussion on the protocol for doing this going forward. And I'm going to go back to 2012, at the end of 2012, going through 2013. Stuart Van Horn actually led an effort with respect to how we deal with using data. And that issue was focused on the potential water year 2012 exceedance that was occurring and how we were going to evaluate that. And we were dealing with preliminary data back then. And what the consensus was from that effort of about 6 months of effort was that the TOC would only deal with final data when discussing the exceedances. And so my concern here is twofold. It seems like we might be setting precedents here to change that protocol that was established. And so for one, we do have preliminary data being presented here, and those preliminary data are incorporated into many of the conclusions that are made. And we noted that the district did give their presentation today and provided preliminary data, but they're not making conclusions. So that's one precedence that I'm concerned about, but it's not a big concern for me. I think using the preliminary data to understand the drivers and everything that's going on is adequate, but the other concern I'm having is the procedural, and so how we're supposed to go through the process of bringing these to the table and then actually having a vote or some kind of process by which we say, yes, we're going to use or make this modification to our protocol. And so that's what I want to talk about really quickly at this table and just open it up for the TOC members to at least provide input on how we should be going forward with respect to modifying our protocol. And I'm hoping that we can continue to do that as a team and not one individual change that, because that can become a quickly slippery slope.
Sure. Donato, thank you for that comment. We appreciate that. We received the comment in advance from you. We deliberated on it. We decided that we felt that because we were just presenting the information in order to drive a discussion, we weren't intended to come to strong conclusions based off of 1 year's of data, but the conclusions were based off the entire library of information we were analyzing. We felt that it was okay to include it in this situation. We could have removed the 1 year of data, we would still have the same conclusions. So we understand we weren't making a conclusion on the water quality data from the preliminary year. It was a conclusion based off of the long-term trend analyses that we did for the presentation. So I appreciate that. But if it still needs to be, come up for a deeper discussion with the TOC, we're certainly prepared to have that discussion.
I appreciate you characterizing it like that, but it does seem like you guys focus pretty heavily in your conclusions on 3 years of COP instead of the 2 that we had the opportunity to evaluate. I don't know how to proceed with this with respect to a communication amongst the whole TOC members, but if there are any other input, I would like to hear that now. If not, then go ahead and give your presentation.
Okay, let me just make sure I understand. So you're asking the TOC members to weigh in on whether or not or how the Federal Water Year 23 information should be considered and whether or not we're changing protocols here. Is that the question, Donato? Okay. I will just pop in at the moment. We have made a huge effort at our agency over the last several years to be transparent. And I think and you have a really good point, so I don't want to diss that at all. You're spot on. And we do have quite a procedural process for dealing with use of preliminary data or provisional data versus final data. I don't see this upcoming presentation as really being contrary to that, in that this data is all available publicly to everybody right now. It's not data that is just floating on somebody's computer or somewhere else. So, that's part of it from my perspective. I personally would prefer to not change the protocol in terms of coming up with final compliance numbers, but I think as scientists and researchers and engineers looking at trends and other things, I think, for this particular case, I'm okay with the fact that DEP is using the Federal Water Year 23 information, but you may find on some of the slides, Ed, that you want to point out that you're treating it as X and it's not really X yet. I think that would be helpful here. But feedback from anybody else, Dan or Lori?
This is Lori with the Refuge, and you both have really good points. I would not feel comfortable voting on provisional data. So I don't want to change our protocol. As a scientist, I think even looking at provisional data is helpful in starting to form my thoughts about whatever X, Y, and Z is. I do not want to change our protocol. But I think maybe as long as Ed is explaining, this is provisional data, blah, 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 and then we can ask questions and we can clarify. I'd say go with it for today.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
This is Dan Crawford, the Corps of Engineers. I echo Lori's statement. I think it's appropriate to, in the interest of transparency, put as much information on the floor as we can, but I agree, I would not feel comfortable making any voting decisions based on the provisional data. But I do appreciate, Julie, your point as well about the interest of transparency. Obviously, the Corps of Engineers, Water Management District, we're making operations on the system. based on real-time data as it's coming in. So, the availability of having the forward look that Chelsea includes in her presentation on the provisional data, and the fact that DEP has extended a great amount of effort to pull together this presentation. I personally appreciate the inclusion of the provisional data, but just want to echo Lori's perspective that it's premature to make any conclusions or voting based on it. And I agree also maintaining status quo on the process and the protocols, waiting until the data is finalized. Over.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Ed, I don't know if you want to say anything. I guess what I'm hearing here, I would ask if there's slides of yours that show a provisional exceedance or something, if you could make it really, really, really clear that that's not our official protocol.
Yeah, I can certainly thank, this is Ed, DEP. That's not a problem. I think we've got it identified in each of the slides where the provisional data is being used, so we'll make sure we're clear that it is provisional data, and further analysis needs to happen before we can come to any true conclusions of the data. I also just want to be clear that there was never an intent that this would be a voting discussion for the TOC members. Our idea was this is a kind of a springboard presentation. We took Donato's presentation from the last TOC meeting. It was an excellent presentation. It was certainly thought-provoking. It brought a lot of questions to the forefront for DEP, and so we used that as our springboard for the current presentation I'll be giving here, with the idea that we just wanted to explore deeper into what is going on, try to get to the whys and hows of everything that's going on within Water Conservation Area 3A, but I'll be sure that during my presentation that I will do my best to identify those where provisional data were used in the analyses.
I appreciate that, Ed. So what I'm hearing from everybody is we are not saying that this is going to be the end of Water Year 2022, because I thought that was the point of this presentation.
I'm going to confess here. After Ed's presentation, I was going to ask again about Water Year 22. So just to remind everyone, we had 3 questions that were given to us back in 2016 by the principals. The first question had to do with whether or not we've sufficiently evaluated the data. The second question was whether or not we deemed whether or not we determined there was substantial evidence that the exceedance was due to error or extraordinary natural phenomena. And so we did already determine for federal Water Year 22, it was not due to error or extraordinary natural phenomena, which got us to the third question. And I know Donato and Ed can see me shuffling paper here, I'm sorry. The third question actually goes back to page C4 of the consent decree. And I'll just go ahead and read that to you now, and then we can decide later, I guess, what we're going to do about it. But the way this reads, and this is the third question, if the park or refuge phosphorus limits or concentration levels are violated, then additional remedies will be taken, such as expansion of STAs, more intensive management of STAs, a more stringent EAA regulatory program, or a combination of the above. And then it goes on to say that the state parties shall not implement more intensive management of the STAs as the sole additional remedy. And so, my question, especially after Ed gets finished, is to ask you folks, are we able to resolve the so-called question number 3 associated with federal Water Year 22? And either we don't have anything more to recommend to the principals, we already have a memo from the principals, but we may still have a little bit of an open question here, and we can discuss. I was going to give you my opinion right now, but I'll wait. So we will ask that after Ed's, and if we don't land anywhere, then guess what? We're not done with federal Water Year 22 yet. But I think we've identified a huge amount of work, and Donato, as Ed mentioned, you brought up some very good questions that we've all been looking at. And we may or may not have answers to those today. So, I just kind of throw that out there because quite frankly, the engineer in me wants to check my check boxes, and I have not checked box number 3, guys, for federal water year 23, or 22, sorry. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And Ed, if you want to get ready, that's okay too. I was never, maybe my mistake, under the impression that this was a wrap-up of water year 22. I just thought this was more of a hysterical. I like that. More of a historical, kind of a look at the system almost as a whole. Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly what we were looking at. We wanted to take that deeper dive into the system as a whole to get a better understanding of the whys and hows. And hopefully, again, like I was saying, this is a springboard to future presentation. More analysis, more looks, better understanding. So,
Thank you.
It would be nice if we could wrap up federal water year 22. It would be, but, we'll let Ed do his thing and then figure out what we want to do, guys. Okay? Thank you.
Because this is a PDF, you just need to use the mouse and scroll up and to see the slides. You will not see here because it's the PDF.
Okay.
And this was designed for PowerPoint.
Okay.
If you need the next document, is this one.
So which one is
here?
one?
This one is this one. Okay? So just scroll.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, TOC members. Mr. Barquette, appreciate the opportunity to present here today. My name is Ed Smith. I'm the Director for the Office of Water Policy and Ecosystems Restoration with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Before I begin, I want to give a special thanks to members of DEP, Luke Hudson, Mylene Sotolongo Lopez, Jordan Tidio, and Kenny Heyman for helping me put together this presentation. And I also want to give a big thanks to each of the TOC members. We tried something different this time. We wanted to get them the presentation in advance, so we were able to do that. So thank you, Mr. Barquette, for that suggestion, so we could do some early coordination. We were able to get it to them in advance, and Donato, I apologize, we did send it just before the Thanksgiving holidays, which created some time crunches for the TOC members, so I promise we won't do that again. We'll do better next time. That's a fix we can work into the schedule next time. But the feedback we got from each of you was very helpful, and I hope that you'll see the changes to most of your comments and suggestions in the presentation. There were a few that we felt like we didn't have the time to really build the presentation around, but we would like to take those comments and build a future presentation based off those. Certainly thought-provoking comments and suggestions, so thank you for that. All right. So outline of the presentation today, we're just going to cover some of the history of the exceedances, looking at the exceedance frequency and magnitude. We're going to look a little bit into the water management changes that have happened throughout the system. Second part of our presentation is a deeper dive into the hydrodynamics of Water Conservation Area 3A, specifically looking at the inflows to the water conservation area. And then we'll end with a dive into the local drivers, kind of our investigation of what we saw through our data analysis. All right. So history of the exceedances, what we have here, and so I can get it better, there we go. We took all of the data, all of the water years from 2007 to 2023, recognizing that 23 is a provisional year and the data is preliminary and is not truly an exceedance at this time. We took all of those years, and we wanted to identify or look to the data to see if there was any trends that we could identify, both with the long-term limit as well as the flow-weighted mean concentrations of those data points. So what you see here on the table or the graph, the plot, the gray shaded area represents the flow-weighted mean concentration range, or the long-term limit range, going from 12.8 to 7.6 micrograms per liter total phosphorus. Each of the blue bars represents the Shark River Slough long-term limit for that year, and then each of the dots on the table represent the flow-weighted mean concentration for that year. If it's a green dot, that means it was determined to be a non-exceedance year. If it's a red dot, it was determined to be an exceedance year. Apologies for 2023. It is not an exceedance year yet. And then the red hash dots are those exceedance years where there was an exceptional occurrence, such as 2008, when there was it was recognized data error, it was an exceptional occurrence. And then in 2017, it was an extraordinary natural phenomenon that occurred. So those while were exceedances, had an exceptional occurrence that deemed them kind of non-exceedances, if you will. So what we did is in the table to the right, again, we did a trend analysis, Kendall-Tao's trend analysis, and what we found from that analysis was that the long-term limit, meaning the target that we have to reach each year according to Appendix A, showed a downward trend, meaning it was getting closer and closer to the minimum over time as we progress out from 2007. However, the flow-weighted mean concentration, based off of our evaluation of all the available data, showed no trend. And so what we're seeing is that increased flows as a result of COP have taken the long-term limit down to the minimum, which is a good thing because we all recognize that more flow getting into Shark River Slough is what we want. That's the ultimate goal. However, by pushing that down and leaving the flow-weighted mean concentrations with no trend, we've increased the frequency of exceedances. If you look at all of the data, 2017 to prior COP years, we had 3 exceedances, or 5 if you want to count those that were explained, within a 14-year period, whereas under the COP, we've got 2 exceedances with a potential 3rd exceedance in 3 years. So 3 out of potentially 3 years going forward. That is anecdotal data. There's not enough data yet within COP to do a true analysis of that. That was one of the suggestions from the Corps, so thank you for that. As we get more data, that's certainly something we would be considering doing. So before I go on, just wanted to note, in the bottom of the table there, we've highlighted the COP years in red. And then if you'll notice, there were 3 water years, the 2000, I believe it's 13, 2016, and 2018, that also had a flow-weighted mean limit of the minimum of 7.6 micrograms per liter, but they weren't exceedance years. And so the department wanted to explore that a little more. We had years with minimum limit with no exceedance and years with minimal limit but an exceedance. So we needed to figure out what's going on in those years. So to do that, what we decided to do was to look at those flows within the Shark River Slough, the total flows, and then look at the flows that occurred when the headwaters at the S333 structure were below 9.2 feet. So what you see on the plot there in the gray, that represents the Appendix A flow range going all the way up to the 1,061,000 acre feet of flow going into Shark River Slough as the cap that produces the minimum 7.6 micrograms per liter of total phosphorus long-term limit. In the dark green bars, you're looking at the flow that occurred at or above 9.2 feet, and then in acre feet. And then in the light green boxes, what you're seeing is the flow that occurred at less than 9.2 feet of, at the headwaters of the S333 structure in acre feet. And what we notice is that for COP, each of the 3 years is showing an increase in the low stage flow. And what we mean by low stage is anything less than 9.2 feet headwaters at the 333. So COP is showing that we've increased those low stage flows into Shark River Slough. And in the previous years, we don't see that same thing. But I want to draw your attention to 2016, because if you look at that and you look at 2021, you'll see that 2016 actually had slightly more low stage flow into Shark River Slough than 2021. So this was something that piqued more questions for the department. What's going on here? But we were able to say with the lower stage, the higher, as we get stage lower, the higher the flow-weighted mean concentration. And recent years had significant low flow at lower stages. But we needed to explore this more. And so what we were able to do, and I don't have a slide to show this, but we looked at the stages as the headwaters went lower than 9.2 feet. And what we found was that at 8.5 feet, there were no flows in the 2016 year. 0 flows at any stage below 8.5 feet. However, in 2021, we had 45% of all the flows in the low stage deliveries occurred below 8.5 feet. And so what we think may be going on there is that we're seeing this scenario where TP water quality is not equal as we go below 9.2 feet. And we'll explore that a little bit more. One thing I want to highlight here is that the total flow is trended upwards, and that is a statistically significant trend. The S333 stage, less than 9.2 feet flow, has also trended upward, but it's only statistically significant at 0.1, not 0.05 feet. So more information is needed there to confirm that. So one of the things that we were able to just take into consideration of this, because we're looking at COP operations here, and essentially we found that COP's doing exactly what it was intended to do. We're getting improved water deliveries into Everglades National Park, Taylor Slough, and the coastal creeks. And we're getting increased dry season flows into eastern Shark River Slough to improve those ecological health. Now, the ecological health is based off of anecdotal information we've received. We have heard that we've seen a transition in the vegetation from the short duration hydroperiod vegetation to a longer duration hydroperiod vegetation, which our understanding is that's a positive result. We're looking forward to learning more of this as more information becomes available. But the COP final EIS acknowledged these changes in operation would result in both of these things occurring: the increased TP flow-weighted mean concentration and decreased long-term limit, meaning the flows would be greater going into Shark River Slough, therefore we would be closer to that 7.6 minimum TP concentration over time. And it also predicted that this would increase the risk of long-term limit exceedances. And then, as anticipated, those dry season deliveries have been extremely beneficial for the ecology of Shark River Slough, as we noted earlier, and that exceedances of Appendix A have occurred with increased frequency since COP implementation, if the 2023 exceedance does hold as a true exceedance. So to take this a little bit further, we wanted to look at to see if there was any trend as it relates to the magnitude of the exceedances. Are we seeing greater exceedances through over time? So what you're seeing here in the plot is a differentiation between basically good years and bad years. Good meaning below, anything below the line would be we have no exceedances, and a bad year would be anything above the line. The dark line on there represents I believe it's a 5-year average of those differentials between good years and bad years. And what we noted was that until 2020, that long-term average, that 5-year rolling average, stayed, even with exceedances, stayed in the, what I would say, the negative side, with the good side. And then in 2020, it shifted. And it appears, based off of anecdotal data and preliminary data, that we may be seeing a situation where that long-term, or that difference continues to increase over time. But the 5-year average flow weighting mean concentration was less than the long-term limit until water year 2020. That we can say for a fact. So we wanted to explore why this is happening, and so in order to do that, we needed to look into the way the water moves through the system. And we decided to look at these 3 different flow paths: the western inflows, Miami Canal inflows, and the eastern inflows, in order to gain a better understanding of how the water moves through the system. And in the bottom of the slide there, just want to note, we only focused on the S12s and the 333 complex for our outflows. That's simply because the contribution to other outflows, such as the 355A and B, the 334 and 356, were very minimal to the overall compliance calculation. So for the western inflows, essentially there's 2 inflows, 2 canal-based inflows. So we have the S190, which gets its flows are derived from the West Feeder Basin to the marsh, and then the S140, which again it takes L28 Barrow Canal and then to the marsh via the C60 canal. There's a little bit of interaction there with the I-75 canal, both north and south of I-75, but ultimately the discharge is into the marsh from those areas. And then we have Mullet Slough, and thank you, Donato, for pointing out that we didn't have it labeled on here. We appreciate that. Mullet Slough goes through this 7-mile gap in the L28 canal and passes down into the marsh and into Water Conservation Area 3, carrying water from Big Cypress National Preserve. So we wanted to explore this a little bit more, and so we did some analysis of the data here. What you see on the right, the map represents the data points or the stations that are presented each year in the Chapter 1, Volume 1, Chapter 3 of the South Florida Environmental Report produced by South Florida Water Management District. Those are the marsh stations circled in white and the canal stations circled in blue. The reason we circled those was because we wanted to highlight that those are the same stations that are in our table here. And our table represents an analysis of a 5-year geomean. And we decided to, because our geomean was using all available data, we decided to, or all available seasonally screened data, excuse me, we decided that we needed to use the 5-year wind recorded flowing data just to make sure we weren't creating some kind of screened or biasing of the data. So we tried to incorporate all of that. And what we see from the data in the table is that indeed the S190 and S140 do bring in to the marsh high concentrations of total phosphorus. And the same trend occurred regardless if you used all of the seasonally screened data or the data where flow was recorded. It's high. The variability was also high in that. But what we're seeing is once those flows get into the marsh, by the time they reach the marsh stations downstream from these areas, we're seeing background concentrations of total phosphorus. So we go from 40 and 50 parts per, or micrograms per liter, to 4.4 to a high of 4.7 in those marsh sites of micrograms per liter of phosphorus. And then at the outflows, which is at the S344 and the S12A, those are the only ones we have analyzed in this table, we see a reoccurrence, if you will, of total phosphorus. That was interesting to us. We had a hard time understanding how the water went from high to low and then back to high phosphorus. And so we wanted to try to dig into that a little bit. So we wanted to look at the 12A structure, in this case focusing on the flows and the contributions, because we know that the western contributions ultimately end up at the 12A structure in that region. So we wanted to look at, well, what's the contribution of this? And so on this table or this chart, what we have is a representation of the amount of flows contributing to the annual Shark River Slough calculations, flow calculations. What we see in the dark is when flows are above when the headwaters at the S333 are above 9.2 feet, and in the light green, you see when those flows are below, or above, or yeah, below 9.2 feet. So at or above 9.2 feet, dark green, below 9.2 feet in the light green. And what you'll see is that there is virtually no flow at the S12A structure when flows are below, when the stage at the S333 is below 9.2 feet. I believe it's, we've looked at all of the data in here, and it looks like it's 12 out of 17 years that's the case. And so we concluded that the S12A contributes a small portion of the total flow to the long-term limit equation in this case.
Ed, I don't really want to interrupt your flow, but almost no one can see the entire slides, and I don't know, I'm kind of looking at Violetta and Diana. Was there any way to get this more on the screen?
I'm not sure. There's a way to do the sizing, but I can't. Is it right here?
Stuart says there's a button or an arrow somewhere here, and Jody looks like she's going to help us out real quick. Thank you.
And I can't really see it. Ah, there we go. Thank you.
Yay, thank you for the
That helps a lot.
rescue, both Donato and Jody. Thanks.
Thank you, Jody. Appreciate that. So again, S12A flows make up a small portion of the total flows to the Shark River Slough. And again, S12A is closed during the dry season and does not contribute to flow when the S333 headwaters are less than 9.2 feet. So now we wanted to explore the Miami Canal inflows, focusing in on how the water moves from the S8 down in through the system, with the understanding that the S339 and S340 have a regulation schedule that requires them to be closed typically any time that the concentrations at the S333 are high, i.e. when there's a low stage. And so what we've done in the table to demonstrate that is we've identified when flows are measured greater than 0 at each of these structures, and then we've identified with all of the structures being counted and stages below 9.2 feet, you see that it's less than 0.2% of the time that these stations are measuring flow at low stages, less than 9.2 feet measured at the 333 headwaters. So there was a lot of discussion at the last TOC meeting. We wanted to explore these a little bit more. We found that the canal, the Miami Canal, based on our understanding, there's no levees, so it encourages a lot of interaction with the water conservation area here, the marsh throughout here. And we wanted to explore that a little bit more to see what the data say. So again, we did the same situation. We did a 5-year geo-mean, looking at the data as presented, the sites or the stations that is presented in the SFER each year. And what we saw was you have the S8 with an elevated TP concentration, 15 parts per billion, or if you use just those that where flow is being measured, it's slightly less than 17 parts per billion, or micrograms per liter. But as you move down the canal and it hits these plugs and starts going out into the marsh, the S339 plug and the S340 plug, we're seeing the marsh stations with what I would consider lower TP concentrations. 5.7 micrograms per liter, 9.2 micrograms per liter. One of the things we want to highlight here is this C36 station. This one was particularly tricky for us because it had very limited data that we could use because of the screening process we have to use. The screening process is outlined in the Florida Administrative Code. It requires us to seasonally screen the data. That means we have to have at least 3 data points in a water year, and we have to have a data point and at least each water year, the dry season and the wet season of each water year. So this one here is very limited. I think it's 5 data points that we were able to do. So it's limited data. So it shows that there's potentially some drying out phenomena going on at this one here. And then I also want to point out the C123SR84 station here, which is used as a surrogate for the S340 structure for water quality. We dug into this side a little bit because it seemed interesting that it had higher phosphorus concentrations than the S8. And so we believe there had to be something going on at this site to create that higher phosphorus level. And what we're seeing is that the site is located extremely close to the I-75 rest area. There's a lot of impervious surface in this area. And there's also a condition where the canal makes an odd kind of a right-hand hook right at this point before going down. So it appears that there may be a stagnation issue going on where the water doesn't flow as well throughout this area, especially with the plug being in place here. It's not a lot of movement. So we think that may be the results of why we're seeing a elevated phosphorus higher than the inflows from the S8, with the understanding that this is the major flow path to get down this way. So for the eastern inflows, we took a look at the S150 structure, which receives its water predominantly from the STAs, and I believe that's STA 3-4 specifically, which is the best performing STA. There's the L38 plug right here, which forces the water from the S150 to enter the marsh instead of going down this canal. And then there's the S111s A through C, which are located along the L38 West Canal, and they're bringing in marsh water from Water Conservation Area 2A, which receives its water from STA 2 and Loxahatchee Wildlife National Refuge, which it receives its waters from STA 1 West and 1 East predominantly. So this is marsh water going into the marsh here in Water Conservation Area 3. And then lastly, we wanted to look at the S9 and S9A structure, because these are the ones that have potentially the most connection to the L67A canals here. But this structure is designed to bring in floodwaters from, and you can see it in this image here, bring in floodwaters from eastern Broward County through their municipal stormwater system that they have. So it's bringing in those floodwaters when they get high waters within their municipalities. So same thing, we did the geomean analysis on these using the stations, and this is focused on just the S150 and S11A through C. So we use the same stations as reported in the SFER each year, and we see the same trend. At the inflow points, we do have elevated TP, and when we do the with flow analysis, there wasn't a lot of change in this one, which was interesting to see, good to see. But we see as the flows get into the marsh, we see again that reduction in phosphorus, total phosphorus concentrations. So there is tremendous uptake in the marsh as the water flows in there. And then this water, once it flows into the marsh, flows down through the system and ultimately ending up in the southern portions. The S9 and S9A were a little more complicated, a little more tricky to understand, and it required additional analysis on our part. But we did the same thing. We did a 5-year geomean and a 5-year geomean when recorded flow was happening. Interesting thing we saw here was that the TP concentrations for the S9 and S9A appeared to have an inverted relationship with the S333 and 333N, meaning when the 333 and 333N concentrations were high, i.e. low stage, the S9 were low. And it was interesting, just noted that. So we decided to dig into that a little bit more. We wanted to really kind of get a better understanding of what's going on there. So we put this together. This is a representation of the mean TP concentrations at both the S333 complex and the S9s. This is aggregated together. What you see here on the data plot, the yellow bars represent when the S9 concentrations are greater than the S333. The green bars represent when the S33 complex TP concentrations are greater than the S9 complex. And then the blue line, this light blue line, represents the headwater stage at the S333. So we see that same pattern. As the headwater gets below 9.2 feet, we see this increase in phosphorus at the S333. But when it's above 9.2, we see that increase in phosphorus at the S9 structures. And we actually found out that above 9.2 feet, it's a 35% decrease than the S9s at the when you compare it to the S333s. But when it's below, it's a 9% higher at the S333s than the S9s. So again, TP concentrations at the S333s tend to be higher than the S9s when the stage is low, and the reverse is true. When the stages are higher, the S9s tend to be higher. So we wanted to explore this a little bit more to figure out if this was a situation where, because we were doing a weekly analysis, were we missing something? Was there something else going on? So we decided to explore to see if there was a lag in the data, so as it's moving down the canal. So what you see here on the plot is the S9 TP load plotted against the S333 TP flow weighted mean concentration. And what we see in this plot here is there is a negative correlation. Any bar to the left identifies a negative correlation over time. So we have different time periods, 7 weeks, 14 weeks, going all the way up. So what we're able to say is there is a negative there's no positive correlation between the S9 cumulative TP loads and the S333 TP flow weighted mean concentrations. We couldn't establish that based off of this analysis, regardless of any lag time. And these plots here on the right simply demonstrate that. This is all of the data. This is at 7 days. You see this odd curve. This is at 30 days. Again, that odd curve exists. And then when you get out beyond that, you start to see this negative trend occur, this line that points down to the right. If it were a positive trend, it would be pointing up to the right. So in summary, what we found is that for the western inflows, because of the interaction with the marsh and the gap in the L28 canal, and because of Mullet Slough and its directional flow in there, there's really no way for these flows at the S190 or S140 to make a direct connection to the outfall, or the outflow source, which is the S12A here. And then for the Miami canals, what we saw is there's no direct line in which these can flow down this canal into the L67, even if you're taking into consideration the fact that there is this phenomenon where it's bypassing this plug structure, the blockage. There's still all the interaction that occurs between the canal and the natural flow of the water from the northwest towards the southeast, and the fact that there's no levees along here to discourage that interaction from occurring. So there's a lot of marsh canal interactions along the Miami Canal that the marsh stations along and around it indicate low phosphorus concentrations based off the data analysis. As for the eastern flows, the S150 ends up in the northeast portion of water conservation area sheet flow, and that phosphorus concentration is quickly reduced as it goes through the marsh. Same with the 11A's, B's, and C structures, which is the predominant source of water into conservation area 3A. And then for the S9s, there appears to be some interaction with the marsh going on that's hard to explain because these concentrations don't seem to have a direct relationship. At least we haven't discovered that relationship at this time. So we couldn't find a real good, strong connection there. We wanted to focus our efforts on the local drivers. And so we've seen this. This is just a representation of what we kind of have already seen. On this plot here, the blue line represents the stage. Light blue means it's above 9.2 feet, and dark blue means it's the stage at the headwaters of the 333 is below 9.2 feet. Down at the bottom, this represents the actual grab data used for the analysis, and the black line represents a 12-week flow-weighted mean, or a trend of the concentrations. And what we're seeing is just as we've said, as the flows or the stage comes down, we see this spike in phosphorus that comes up. But the interesting thing we found when we did our analysis, our trend analysis to correlate the concentrations to low stage, is that as it comes down towards 9.2 feet, phosphorus increases by 1.3 micrograms per liter. But once you get to 9.2 feet and you start going down further, the increase speeds up, or it increases by a greater amount, by almost sixfold. So it goes from 1.3 micrograms per liter per foot of recession to 7.6 micrograms per liter per foot of recession. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier, where we found that below 9.2 feet, water quality isn't equal. So you get this increasing uptick of phosphorus by magnitude of about sixfold. So then we wanted to look at the exceedance years, and comparing them in proportion to flows when the S333 is lower than 9.2 feet. So on the left, you have the percent of all of the Shark River inflows into, when the 333 structure is below 9.2 feet. And then on the right plot, you have only the percent of flows at the 333s when that structure is, the headwaters are below 9.2 feet. And so what you can see is those exceedance years show an extreme bias towards those low flows at the 333 structure during those years. So when the stages are lows at the 333 headwaters, we're getting more flow into Shark River Slough from the 333 as a percent. So it's biasing our results in our calculations. And I guess bias is the wrong word, but it is pushing that to a higher number. So conclusions, and again, the conclusions aren't based solely on the provisional water year 2023 data, but we feel that you can make the same conclusion if you took that data out. Long-term limit has been trending down, and the Shark River Slough flow-weighted mean concentration has no trend. The frequency and magnitude of the exceedances have increased. More water is being delivered, especially during the dry conditions, to Shark River Slough, which is a good thing. That's what I want to emphasize. COP is doing its job, doing a good thing as it was intended to do. For the hydrodynamics, the marsh data don't support that the S190, S140, S150, and the S11A through C are major TP contributors to the Shark River Slough outflows. And that's because of the interaction with the marsh as it flows down through the system. For the Miami Canal, water entering the L67A has been highly influenced by marsh interactions, as can be seen by the data provided, the marsh data that's in and around those canals, having low TP concentrations. And the S9 TP loads appear to be inversely correlated with the S333 TP flow weighting mean concentrations. This is giving us an indication that there is a marsh interaction along the L67A, which influences those TP concentrations. And then finally, for the localized drivers, TP concentration rate of increase is 6 times higher when the S333 headwater stage recedes under 9.2 feet per foot of recession, and that the higher annual proportions of low stage Shark River Slough deliveries are strongly associated with the exceedance years. And finally, what I wanted to put up here just for discussion is kind of looking ahead into the future. We wanted to just kind of keep it on all of our radars that as we move through and implement more and more of the SERP projects, this change in hydrodynamics is going to happen. It's going to have a major impact on how the water moves through the system. So for SEP North, we're going to have the backfilling of the Miami Canal and the L4 Canal, which is going to increase that sheet flow into the Northwest Water Conservation Area 3A, giving us even greater marsh interaction and less opportunity for any bypassing of those plugs getting down the L67A, if that were to be the case. For the SEP South portion, the Blue Shanty flowway and some of the other features are going to create a situation where there's less reliance on the 333 complex and more marsh sheet flow into Shark River Slough regions. So again, more marsh interactions, more uptake, better water quality overall as an ancillary benefit. The Western Everglades Planning Project, which is currently on schedule for award of 2024 authorization, but South Florida is already moving out on some of the southern features. That's going to eliminate that S190 and S140 connection to the or reduce their connection to Water Conservation Area 3, particularly the S190, because of the plugging of the L28 interceptor canal that's being explored right now in the planning process. And then the North Feeder STA is going to deliver better water quality, Q-Bell water quality rated water into the Northwest Water Conservation Area 3A, so improving those water quality features coming down into the area. And then finally, the Broward County Water Preserve area, the impoundments there are going to help reduce the need for those high flooding flows into Water Conservation Area. And we anticipate that there would be some sort of attenuation of the high phosphorus that may be coming off of the urban areas from Broward County. And then couple all of that with what we just heard from Jody. There's going to be the work that's going on down in this very southern end of the system that was explored by the 333 working groups. All of these changes are going to be happening, some of them in the very near future, some of them a little further out, but ultimately all of this is going to have a significant impact on how water flows through the system and ultimately gets into Shark River Slough, and it's going to warrant a lot of further discussion, exploration, and investigation by the scientists. And with that, I'm happy to take questions from the TOC members.
Thank you, Ed. And I just want to point out for folks who aren't looking at their screens, we have a couple of hands raised already, but Donato, did you want to?
Ed, wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. And again, we appreciate having the extra time to actually evaluate the material that was going to be presented. Can we go back to slide 9? Can we keep the slides on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So this big arrow to the east of the L28, why is that there?
It's just, it's really just showing how water flows from these structures ultimately. It's not showing an exact location of the flow, but just showing the fact that this flow and this flow ultimately get into the marsh. That's all. It's probably a poorly placed. We could have put it in a better location, but it's really just for demonstrative purposes to show that flow from the canals ultimately ends up in the marsh before going further south.
All right, thank you. Can you advance to slide 10? All right, so your conceptual arrows here are consistent with what we've been describing for the last few years at this meeting. And they kind of overlay with what the RSM is suggesting the regional scale of flow would be occurring. And I note that you do have a nice set of arrows coming from Mullet Slough down into Conservation Area 3. So just south of that big arrow, we have this little leg that extends from the L28 or L28I, and that's where the water is actually released into the marsh. And just downstream of that is at least 2.5 mile vegetation plume filled with invasive vegetation that is responding to the nutrient loading there. It seemed to suggest that this phosphorus is not actually moving down here. But my concern, and I've raised it several times, is we don't have a sampling design that is adequate to address that question, because these sample locations in the marsh are situated slightly east of those flow paths that have been described for these waters to move. So when talking about this in this one point, talking about this point, I feel like we really need to focus on developing a study that actually addresses this to understand it. My second point here is, are you guys comfortable using this area as an attenuation feature in Miccosukie's reservation? Is that what I'm understanding from this presentation?
So I answer the second question first. It was not our conclusion that this was being used as an attenuation feature, but we were just simply stating facts that were what's happening in the system today. We were exploring to try to figure out what's going on in the system today. It wasn't a representation of that conclusion. So if that's your conclusion, I understand it, but it wasn't ours.
Wait, it is attenuating or is not attenuating?
Well, what we're saying is that when the water enters the marsh is uptaking phosphorus. It doesn't matter where it enters the marsh. Phosphorus is being uptaken. And nature doesn't observe boundaries that we make. So as the water flows in, where it flows, that's where it's going to be uptaken. So it's not our conclusion that we are using these as attenuation features for the phosphorus. That's not our conclusion. We're simply representing how the water flows through the system and then showing that downstream of these points where water enters the marsh, the concentrations of total phosphorus go back to background in a very short period. And we have historical data from our transect data that shows that that's typically within 1 to 3 kilometers. Once it enters into the marsh, we get very good water quality in those in those length of travel for the marsh. So.
Okay, so I did do a physical measure using Google Earth of that vegetation plume, and it goes around 2.5 miles before it starts to get thinned out. So I'm not really clear where that level of phosphorus actually attenuates to background in this area. So again, I think we actually need to establish a study that would help us do that, because again, as your arrows point, it flows south.
So my recollection is that vegetation halo is somewhere right in about this area?
No, it's west. It's slightly west and directly downstream of that.
Right here?
Yes.
And so then when you look down here, you see that this is back to background. It's less than 5 parts per billion.
And that's my point. That is outside of the flow paths that have been described here in this figure, as well as in the RSM modeling effort. Can we go to slide 11? Can you please explain the math on this, particularly for the 333 north and 333? How do we have more flow that's total be less than the flow that's less than 9.2, delivered at less than 9.2 feet?
This one was a tricky one for me to understand, so if I may, I'm gonna ask either Luke or Mylene if you could kind of step in and help me better explain this slide.
I can step in. This is Luke. The dark green sections shown here are a percentage of the total flows across all sites. So for instance, 333 and 333 North contribute 30 to 40% of total Shark River Slough flows, but they contribute 80% of low stage Shark River Slough flows, if that makes sense.
Okay, so we're not, okay. No.
It's essentially comparing two different things. The dark green is comparing when, you know, all of the flows, but the light green, and perhaps it could have been better done in two separate plots to distinguish that. And so it's comparing the flows, the percentage of flows in between each of the structures at different time periods. So you can't compare it's not to compare the light green to the dark green. The dark greens all are related and the light greens are all related.
Okay.
So what it's saying is that if you ignore the dark green, just look at the light green, when stages are below 9.2 feet, 80% or so of the flow that's going into Shark River Slough is coming from the 333 complex, the remaining 20% is coming from the 12A, B, and C, and D structures, which we've highlighted that the 12A is rarely flowing, and B looks like it's almost never flowing at the same time when low stages are there. It should have been done as we could have done it as two plots, and I think it would have been easier to understand.
All right, can we go to slide 11?
Slide.
All right, 12, slide 12. So on this slide, when I look at Google Earth and I zoom in down this canal coming from S8 all the way down to L67A, this vegetation dynamic that you're showing in this area just upstream of the S339 is pretty consistent. And to me, that indicates that that area is pretty heavily loaded by nutrients to support the vegetation density along this canal. And so earlier you described there's a lack of a levee between the canal and the marsh. So that suggests that there's heavy interaction between the canal and the marsh. I'm trying to understand, how are we saying that adding the additional load coming from the S8 is not contributing to that load that we're finding in this marsh and connected to this canal? Because when we get further away, as you pointed out, the concentrations decrease and the density of vegetation also decreases as we move away from the canal. What are you suggesting the source is? And I did hear your point about the I-75, but again, I'm seeing this vegetation extend along the stretch of this canal.
That is a really good question, and one that we had also that we felt like it needed further exploration. We don't have that information right now, but again, you have to remember that this canal is cut perpendicular to the natural flow within the water conservation area. So the water conservation area flow tends to come in from the northeast and down towards the southwest. This goes northwest to southeast, and so it's that interaction of flow from this area across this canal that's occurring while this water from the S8 makes its way through the marsh. So the only thing we could think of, Donato, is that there's significant uptake of phosphorus as it moves through here. As for explaining this phenomena here, again, we definitely need to do some more exploration there. There's something going on there that it doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem to be logical that as it moves through the system and there's all the marsh interaction that you would see this uptick of phosphorus. This site we could explain because of the dry out. We think that because it is a site that often dries out, we get a situation where the phosphorus, you get a bump of phosphorus when it does get wet again, and that's what we're seeing. Because you can't get a sample when there's no water, when it's dry, but then when they do get a sample, we're getting this re-wetting effect that's going on. So that's what we think is happening at this location. But this one, there's a lot going on. If you do we did the same thing. We took Google Earth and we zoomed in on it, and you see there's this kind of an S bend in the canal, the Miami Canal that comes down here, and there's interaction with the I-75, and also it's right near their parking lot. It's right near the rest station, so rest area. So who knows what's going on? I wanted to do a little more investigation on this one going forward. But thank you for that question. It's a good question.
Okay, I'm hoping we can figure out how to investigate the entire stretch as well, because it's completely loaded. So can I go to 16, 17, 18?
16, all right.
So now we're talking about the S9 and the S9A and its interaction with the L67A canal. And then, so what was used to describe what's going on here was, okay, we have high flows that happen when it's wet season, which is what drives the high loads. And then we have high concentrations down at S333 in the dry season, which we've all been suggesting is driving our increased concentrations. But it seems like that's being used to discount the fact that the S9 is still loading the L67A canal. And I'm really not understanding the logic. I also looked at correlations between these, which I wouldn't do because it's 25 miles apart and all of the lag stuff you described concerns, but I see positive correlations between daily values for the S9 and the S333 concentrations when you compare those directly. I also see positive correlations when you compare the loads directly. But when we try to compare loads to flow weighted means 25 miles away, when they're seasonally driven by different dynamics, and then use that to argue that the S9 is not contributing to the L67A, I get concerned. I'm not really following what is trying to be communicated. Are you suggesting the load from the S9 is not actually going down the L67A?
What we were suggesting is that there is more to the story than simply just traveling down the L67A. We believe that there is some marsh interaction that's occurring as it moves down the L67 from the S9, and it's not as simple as saying you've got an input and an output. That's all.
Okay, I agree with that point.
And then you said 17?
No, that covered that whole stretch. Can we go to slide 21?
Sure.
So I just wanted to say, I like this recession analysis. That is pretty cool, and I appreciate that you guys went down that road. I considered it, and just it fell off my radar. This is a good point. Thank you.
Well, I have to give all the shout out to Luke. He's the one that did the hard work on this, so thank you, Luke, for that. It is an impressive slide, so thank you.
Okay, Bill Walker, you have your hand up.
You said it was very informative and provocative. So, you know, you triggered a lot of ideas, which probably too numerous, but let's go. If you could start with a map, the best map you have of just the water conservation area, just a simple one. That's good enough, I guess. Well, all right. And that leads back to the transport of S12A, and then you clearly showed the flow volumes are a low percentage, or essentially zero, when the stage is less than 9.2. But it's not just a north to south flow transport. And my question is whether the higher concentrations from that western basin, yeah, they're going through the marsh, but the flow vectors could be affecting the flows at B and C as well. It's like a fan shaped, and you can probably get that, you know, under some of the hydrologic model output, the flow arrows and so forth. So, you know, to me, it's not enough to show. I mean, you can't conclude that the western basins aren't impacting the compliance just by looking at S12A. You have to understand the flow and phosphorus transport down to B and C. And yeah, the marsh takes up phosphorus, but, you know, we're using just, what is it, monthly grab samples in the marsh, and a lot goes on during those storm events. That's when the stuff is flushed out of the marsh. So, you know, it starts to get complicated, and that's where the research, my previous question on the research goes. And the other one, if you concluded, I think that, no, you didn't use S334. Could you go back to that one? There was a slide on, what is that? The fundamental thing where you start to keep going.
I can't remember exactly where it is. I know what you're talking about, but I think it's this one right here.
Well, you just had a simple slide that said, we didn't use the S334 flows. We just looked at ABC.
Oh, yeah, here, this one.
And historically, a lot of the flow under low stage went out through S334. And that essentially subtracted that phosphorus load from the compliance. So that major change in COP and, you know, hydrologic restoration in general, that could have as large an effect as, you know, just the operation of 3A. It's more that in combination with S334 responsible for the trends. Anyway, that's a thread. And then the other one, which I like sort of toward the end, where you put SEP in there. Yeah, well, you know, you're right. I mean, we put a lot of sweat into trying to design that to deal with the water quality. That's what it was about. And yeah, there was a plan, and everybody seemed to agree with it. So the question then becomes when? I mean, what is the time scale for implementing these features?
That's a good question. As I said, for the SEP North features, I know South Florida Water Management District is currently moving out on the Miami Canal features. That's something that we're having those discussions with them on. They've completed the A2 STA should be getting the NPDS permit for it soon, and the Corps is working on the operations plan to allow them to use that. The Corps is actively constructing the reservoir that goes along with that. The Corps is actively doing work in the southern part of the system for the some of the L67 work that's being done. They're working on it. So time-wise, I don't have that at hand, but I know the integrated delivery schedule that was just put out showed some timelines in there. But I don't know, Dan, if you want to, if you can recall what's going on with the SEP South stuff.
Yeah, excuse me, specifically the south end there in that blue shanty business, that's just opening those structures before the flow gets to D. And the S9, S9's another question, is that the concentrations you're showing are 10. They used to be below 6. And so isn't that that trend or that change gets back to what are the projects in the C51 upstream of S9? So too many comments at once, but yeah, that whole part of the hydrologic restoration and the water quality features that are explicit in it, the time frame for those.
I think what we can do, perhaps in the next TOC, we can make sure we report on those timeframes. It might be beneficial for the team to understand that. Thank you.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I have the pleasure of keeping track of physical and virtual hands being raised. So next we have Dan Crawford.
Thank you, Julie. Ed, thank you for the very thorough, as Donato alluded to, thought-provoking presentation. I just want to stand on the soapbox because we've had so much discussion on that last slide. Completely agree with all your points, Ed, that the Corps and the Water Management District under SERP, our project implementation reports do acknowledge water quality benefits associated with construction of the Central Everglades Planning Project, the Western Everglades Restoration Project, and the Broward County Water Preserve Area projects. But I do want to highlight one word you indicated, Ed, that those are ancillary water quality benefits. The principal goals of those projects are restoring the Everglades and restoring natural historical flow paths. And I just want to make sure we continue to emphasize that SEP and WERP are not considered corrective actions or remedies for the consent decree compliance. And both of those projects, SEP and WERP, are statutorily prohibited as federal projects from interfering with or superseding any water quality actions that are required under pending or future judicial proceedings, including the consent decree. So we're 100% on board with realization of those benefits, but want to make sure that the SERP Everglades restoration conversation is kept kind of off to the side from the focal point of this deliberative body, which is on compliance with the Everglades consent decree. And I also want to make sure it's clear that the Western Everglades Restoration Project implementation report has not yet been sent out to the public for public review and comment. The Corps of Engineers does anticipate that report will be published later this month. And so at this point in time, any decision outcomes on the Western Everglades Restoration Project remain pre-decisional until such time as we have the opportunity to circulate that project implementation for public review. But again, really appreciate the in-depth review of the slides on the water quality information, and I look forward to the opportunity to review it more from the Corps side. So thank you, Ed.
Oh, thank you, Dan. And yeah, I was trying to be very careful and make sure that we were only focusing on the changes that the SERP projects would do for hydrodynamic changes. And I think it's important that we acknowledge those changes are going to influence how the system works. And so it's important for the TOC operating body to have a good understanding of those hydrodynamics, because it does impact our decision-making in the future. So that was all. I really wanted to make sure we stayed away from the idea that these would be a remedy. We don't believe these are a remedy. We believe the remedy for the current situation is the work as proposed by the S333 working group and as presented to this TOC body through the principal's memo today.
Okay, thank you both. Next to a physical hand, come on now, we got Lori Miller. Do you have comments, questions, and
I do both.
all the rest?
I do both, and I'll try to make them quick. Lori Miller with the Refuge. So, our earlier conversation before the presentation, we talked about provisional data. My only concern at this point is that this presentation could become a citation or a reference. So perhaps we can either remove the dots and the bars for the provisional data, or we put something on it that says this is, we may put a page on it that explains this is provisional data and not to be used for X, Y, and Z. So my concern is it's a public document now, and we just want to make sure that it's not used necessarily as a citation.
That's a
That
very
makes
good
sense.
point, and we'll explore
Okay.
one of the two options to see
Okay.
which one. We can get it back to the
Just
group. So
let
thank
folks
you for
know.
that. That's a very good suggestion, and
Okay.
we'll keep that in mind. Future, we'll keep it in mind, Donato, that we try to avoid going this path, but we just felt it, unfortunately, timing, we had already built it, so we wanted to make sure we had a cohesive discussion.
Honestly, I think it's something we just need to revisit as a team, because having these preliminary data and being able to discuss them is pivotal to understanding what's going on with the system. So I just think it's something procedurally we need to discuss again and figure out how to approach this going forward. I don't want to preclude us from being able to talk about preliminary data, but the TOC team did that. None of us were on that TOC at the time, so it's something I just think we need to reconsider.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Okay, and then just a couple of slides. So if you want to go to slide 12, this was the discussion about levy, no levy, and we're looking over there at the marsh. The top one I'm going to assume is a 339. I'm having a hard time reading it. So the ecosystem-based management group that meets every other Tuesday, it's basically just a science call filled with ecologists and hydrologists and water managers. During the dry season, sometimes when we start drying in Northwestern 3A, we will ask if there's an ability to open the S8 and begin to move water south. And so we took a really hard look at the S339, and it's more like and Dan Crawford, feel free to, chime in at any time, but I believe it's more like a concrete weir. And you have to release enough water to get the water up and over the weir for it to move down to the S340. However, if we can back the water up to the 339, we've noticed that it does start to move out into the marsh at a level of about 11.2 feet in GVD. So there is a little bit of I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 feet where it goes into the marsh. But you'll notice on the other side, the far side of the bank, there's a lot of vegetation that you were talking about. There's also a ton of spoil mounds along that stretch and even further south that FWC maintains. So you might want to look into that, because I actually went to them to try to get an elevation of those spoil mounds, and the Army Corps kind of helped us come up with some numbers. So there are some spoil mounds galore, I'll say, along that stretch. So that's just something to consider. Let's see. And then when we're discussing flows from the S8 and the S9, I think at some point when you have time to maybe show those flow datas so that we can actually see what we're talking about, how fast are they flowing, when are they flowing, and I think that would help us make a little more sense from some of the conclusions that are being drawn. And then I guess my last concern is in the presentation we have shown that some higher phosphorus water is making it into northeastern 3A and northwestern 3A, and so the marsh is being used to clean that water. Intentionally or unintentionally, that's not the point, but we are, I mean, we are getting some cleaning, and we've talked about that in the last few TOC meetings. It's being shown now that we are definitely getting some cleaning in the marsh. So I just wanted to point that out as well. And then just for the group, if you can run to slide 24 really quickly. And again, you mentioned in your conclusions there in the hydrodynamics that water is being highly influenced by the marsh and the Miami Canal. And we've got another one in there too. Where is it? Where is it? So there's two places in there where you talk about the marsh influencing, yeah. So what are you saying, instead of it just being influenced, is the marsh cleaning? I mean, is it becoming more clean? Is it cleaning the canal? Is the canal, you know, what does influence mean? Is it better or worse?
What we're saying is that there is in that case, we're talking about that there is a mixing, you know, there's a movement of water between the canal and the marsh. It's not, the canal doesn't constrain the water as if it were a pipe or a ditch, you know, that there is a interaction in those. So there is something going on there. For the S9 portion, that was one where we're not sure exactly what's going on, and we wanted to explore that further, but there is something going on there that is influencing TP concentrations. So we don't know what it is. Not sure if it's coming off the marsh or what, but there's something going on. We need
Okay,
to.
so there is an influence. Great presentation. Thank you for the time and effort. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. So, I have a new appreciation for Donato's work, so thank you.
Thank you. We have another virtual hand raised, Dan Scheit.
Thank you, Dan Scheit, EPA, and again, Ed, thanks to you and your team for an excellent presentation. I really love the graphics as well. A couple of comments or questions. First of all, when you present the phosphorus data for the inflows west, east, north, and S9, all the marsh data and structure data are expressed as annual geometric means or geometric means. I think it'd be really helpful and informative to also include annual flow-weighted means, as a lot of us are used to for Appendix A at the inflows to the park, seeing flow-weighted means, and the discharges from the SCAs also are coming in from the north to Water Conservation Area 3 are always reported as annual flow-weighted means. So I think it'd be helpful so we can kind of see both geometric means for the marsh and maybe geometric means and annual flow-weighted means for structures. So that's one thought. Another question is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm kind of wondering how far you would take this presentation. You looked at inflows to Water Conservation Area 3 from the west, and it concluded there's no way the phosphorus from S140 or S190 is affecting phosphorus at S12A, and then point out no direct line in the Miami Canal from S8 all the way down to the park inflows, and looked at the eastern inflows. So are you at the point where you're convinced, or are you concluding that phosphorus inflows to Water Conservation Area 3 from the east or north or west do not affect phosphorus concentrations at inflows to the park?
That's a really good question, Dan. I think what we are concluding is that the localized driver is what is really what is causing the exceedances we're seeing. That any inflows that do come in from the west, the Miami Canal, or the eastern portion, because of the interaction with the marsh as they move down through the system, are not a factor in the exceedances. So the localized driver is what is ultimately resulting in the exceedances. The low stage deliveries of water to Shark River Slough. That's what our analysis has found.
Yeah, and just as an observer, it seems there's a consensus among the TOC members. There are definitely local drivers that are being focused on now. But I guess I'm wondering about that lingering question about upstream sources still, and kind of where the department is with your conclusions. Are they non-existent at this point, or irrelevant, or just not sure yet?
So, as I said, our analysis that we've done to date, we weren't able to find that strong evidence of that connection from the western, the Miami, or the eastern to the S333 complex, or the Shark River Slough inflows.
Okay. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Walker, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah, a couple of questions and comments related to just following up on what Dan said regarding the effect of the inflows on the outflows. If you look at the long-term data going back to the 90s before, there's no doubt that there's an effect. I mean, that averages out all the blips, and there's definitely trends in the inflow concentrations and trends in the outflow concentrations. So it's just that the marsh gets in the way and introduces a lot of variability. And now we're looking at a short time frame, and it's harder to tease those out directly from the data. But I just wanted to emphasize that there is an input-output. It's just a long-term thing. And the other thing is, when I was analyzing the data, in fact, a lot of the programs I've written for load calculation, I include something called the excess phosphorus, which is the product of flow times the difference between the concentration you measure and the threshold. Like, for example, concentration minus 8. 8 is the target, the long-term target for the SRS inflows. And that turns out to be more sensitive, as I recall, to the hydrologic variability. And it really gets at what we're interested in. It's not the load Q times C that causes, the short-term blips. It's more this threshold idea. It's the amount of phosphorus in the water that's causing the problem. It factors out that, because if you just use load, then you'll never restore by that metric, because if it's just load, you're adding flow in hydrologic restoration, and you're adding phosphorus. But if the concentration is low, then you don't, then water quality isn't a problem. Anyway, that's complicated. But, I think this whole discussion has been very informative and kind of stimulating for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. And you're absolutely right. The more we dug into this, the more we realized this is an extremely complicated system. So thank you for that.
Okay, I do not see any other physical or virtual hands raised, Ed. I think we're good. I do want to thank all of you. This is really a great discussion, which I was expecting, so that's good.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And please, take this presentation as a springboard. Let's dig more. Let's collaborate more. We're committed to it at the department. As we build future presentations, we would love to share it with the TOC members, get your feedback, get your thoughts. Let us know where we're wrong. Let us know where we're right, and we'll continue this exploration. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody. So now I need to get back to my checklist. Can I call it Donato's in my checklist? No, I'm only kidding. I guess I need to ask the TOC reps, are you prepared today to make any further recommendations with regard to water year 22? We do have the memo from the principals that implies that the working group activities related to the localized drivers is what they're advocating at the moment. I read you guys some of Appendix C from the consent decree earlier. I can reread that if you'd like. Did you want to take any further action specifically on water year 22? Oh boy, there's a big silent pause there.
So I want to close it out. I think that we've done a fair evaluation of water year 2022. We have not come to agreement on what's happening up regionally, and I think that's okay because we have an actual methodology for trying to improve what we're dealing with right now, the local driver. So I think we have a resolution right now for, or I hope we have a resolution right now for resolving water year 2022 and 19 and 21. So I think we should be able to close it out right now. I don't know that we have to vote on anything, but I'm not proposing anything more than what we already have on the table. Over.
And I actually agree with you, Donato, but could I hear from everyone else, please?
Yeah, this is Lori with the Refuge. I just want everybody to be comfortable, and I agree with Donato.
This is Ed Smith, DEP. I think based off what I've seen from the working group and their efforts, I'm pretty confident that their potential solutions would be the remedy for the issue, the localized issue.
Okay, thank you. Dan, you have your hand up.
I agree. I think as long as we stay away from voting, because I think it's important to follow precedent that the agenda for this meeting did not identify any voting action with respect to the water year 2022 exceedance. I think it's important that we allow all the agencies that wanted to provide a presentation on consent decree compliance matters to include the 2022 exceedance, water year 22 exceedance. So I very much appreciate presentations from the Water Management District, Park Service, and Ed's presentation today. So I again think from the Corps perspective, we're not advocating for any additional action. We're fully supportive of moving forward with what the 333 working group has come up with. And as Jody alluded to in her slides, let's, as we work through our monitoring and assessment plan, that's going to provide us information whether any additional work is needed. And I think based on the discussions today, it may make sense to continue to deliberate whether there's any value to trying to keep some of the 333 working group phase 2 tasks continuing to move forward, at least continue to put a little wind on the dying embers there or whatever, to kind of keep it at the forefront, so that as we do get information from the monitoring and assessment plan, the working group's going to be well positioned to move forward expediently. Over.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I seemed like we're all in agreement that the working group effort should continue. I do recognize a little earlier in the meeting, we also discussed we weren't quite sure about the sourcing, but I think we'll all get to that because that's been really a part of all our discussions. Mr. Barquette.
I just wanted to note that the memorandum that you started off the meeting by reading from refers back to the 2019 exceedance. It doesn't make any reference to the later exceedances. It may be that the recommendations and the work that's been approved or has been started does turn out to be a solution. But I don't think you can reach that conclusion based on what's been presented today.
Thank you for that. The top of the second page of the memo, which I read, and I'm happy to reread it, but it talks about current and potential future, so that would be beyond 2019, Shark River Slough exceedances that occur as a result of the localized drivers in the headwaters. And I think most of what we've discussed here and that the working group is dealing with is the localized drivers.
Yes, I saw that. I saw that paragraph. If you're suggesting that that paragraph somehow controls the first paragraph, that's a oblique way to do it. It certainly doesn't make me comfortable that it's been tackled in a manner that, from a scientific standpoint anyway, is convincing.
Understood. Thank you.
I'll just say, yeah, I think you have an obligation to confront it and decide that, yes, this is the solution, or more needs to be done. And I'm not sure, one of the things that concerned me about the implementation of the steps is I didn't really see a schedule. I saw a proposal for annual report, and I saw that some work had begun, but are there milestones, informational milestones that would make a difference in evaluating the later exceedances as you're doing work on the 2019 remedy or the remedy for the 2019 exceedance? It may be that as you identify when things are going to happen, what information is going to be generated by the things that happen, and how that might impact your evaluation, all seems to me worth discussing.
Okay, thank you.
It's a very easy thing to say, oh, what we've decided for 2019 is going to cover now and everything in the future. I just don't think that's defensible. It's easy to say, it's hard to defend.
Understood. Okay, Dr. Walker, I'm not sure if your hand is still up or up again.
Well, I put it down, but, since you asked. Yeah, just following up on the special masters comment. Julie, you mentioned that the working group has been proceeding not quite ignoring the upstream sources. I mean, after all the discussion that we've just had and all the analysis that Ed and Donato has done previously, is that the path still, that the working groups are going to just kind of slough off the upstream source questions? Or are you going to broaden the scope?
Well, I will say, based on my own history here with the Technical Oversight Committee, oftentimes when these working groups are set up, we take direction directly from the principals. And so in this particular case, the principals directed the working group to look at these localized drivers. I do want to say, and this is many thanks to Donato over the last couple of years as well, I think as a body, we don't want to ignore possible upstream sources or possibly other things going on in the marsh that could affect compliance. And so I'm not saying that the agencies involved here are ignoring the upstream. I think we're making a really conscientious effort to look upstream. It's simply the working group was given a specific mission. And keep in mind, the working group did make recommendations that we may have to go back and further look at sources, right? So that's something that we would either get approval from the principals to move forward on under the working group, or another way for this body as a whole to look at those, continue looking at those sources, because I don't think any of us want to ignore that, Bill. So thank you.
That was my best question.
Okay, I think that's a wrap. We have a little bit of closing business we need to do, you guys, so I'm going to keep you here for a few more minutes. We don't have any meetings scheduled for 2024. And I don't want to have to list these all off to you guys, but it would be good if we could try to narrow down a couple of meetings. And the alternate dates in each of these months that I have here are a Tuesday and a Thursday. So it's just kind of how things landed. And looking at my list here, apparently 2024 must be a leap year. So we're looking at February 27th or February 29th.
27th works for me. Can we stick with the Tuesdays?
Yeah,
27th.
27th is a Tuesday.
27th works for me also.
3 of us are good for the 27th.
This is Dan. I'm good with the 27th, Julie.
Thank you, Dan.
Lori has recently acquired a lot of hats.
Lori is studying very carefully her calendar.
I'm afraid to commit. The 27th, I might be able to make happen.
This is John Barquetta, works for me.
Okay, so let's plan on the 27th, and if some crazy thing happens, we will regroup about that. I don't know if you guys want to look at June. I do have an option maybe of emailing you guys and then telling everybody at the next meeting what we decided. I think that would be acceptable, but for June, we're also looking at the end of the month, so it would be Tuesday, June 25th, or Thursday, June 27th.
You said June 25th, that works for me.
Okay, June 25th is a Tuesday.
I'm good.
Oh, we got 3 of us.
Right now, it works for me. I'll have to check with the boss, though.
How about you, Dan, or Mr. Barquette?
Unanimous for me. This is Dan.
Yeah, it looks like it'll work for me as well.
All right, great. Is there any reason somebody wants to look at September right now, or do you want to wait till we meet the next time?
I vote for waiting.
I think waiting is fine at this time. Thank you.
Okay, so in January, we're going to look at September, and that's very late September, early October, and then we've got a couple of dates in early December again, possible for next year. Okay? Yes, I'd be happy to give you those dates. The June dates, oh, we already did that, sorry. September, we're looking at either, I'm going to say Thursday first, okay, Donato. Thursday, September 26th, or Tuesday, October 1st. And then for the month of December, we have Tuesday, December 3rd, or Thursday, December 5th. And this auditorium gets very busy, so I'm apologetic that we don't have more options for you. But okay, great. So we've got the next 2 meeting dates set. Just let us know if there's a reason we need to regroup on that, you guys. Anything else for today? Public comments. That's a great idea, Jody. Thank you. We still have a number of folks who have hung in there with us, about 20 of you actually, so thank you for that. Do we have any comments from the public today? All I did was make somebody depart. Is that bad? I don't see any raised hands, but again, I want to thank you guys. There's quite a few of you today that really hung in there, so we appreciate that greatly. And look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. So thank you, everyone. We are officially done for today.
Julie, if I may, before we close out, I completely neglected to say thank you to several members of South Florida's team that helped us out. They did a lot of technical review of our work and gave a lot of assistance. So Chelsea Q, Jody Hutchins, Ninid Erkinen, and Stuart Van Horn. So thank you all for that. We could not have made this presentation happen without your help. So thank you.
Thanks. All right, guys, we're done. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great holiday season, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too, sir.
Bye-bye.